This is a compilation of over 3 hours of Fallout location lore to fall asleep to. From every state explained to the hidden places you haven't seen before. Let's kick things off with the states. California. This is where the Fallout universe began, and honestly, it's the perfect place to start because California got absolutely demolished during the Great War. Los Angeles and San Francisco received multiple direct nuclear hits that transformed much of the state into a radioactive wasteland, with the Boneyard becoming a massive crater filled with the skeletal remains of skyscrapers. As Vault-Tec's operational headquarters, California contained the highest concentration of vaults in the country, including some of the most famous experiments in the series. Vault 13 was designed for 200-year isolation until a water chip failure forced the original Vault dweller into the wasteland, while Vault 15 housed people with drastically different ideologies that led to inevitable conflict and the eventual formation of both raider groups and legitimate settlements. Despite the nuclear devastation, California became the most successful post-war region in North America through the establishment of the new California Republic. Major settlements like Shady Sands, The Hub, Junktown, and Necropolis eventually formed the NCR around 2189, creating the first stable post-war democratic government with a constitution and territorial expansion. While California's recovery was impressive, the next state survived through pure technological superiority: Nevada. Nevada experienced the most unique situation during the Great War, thanks to Mr. House's sophisticated defense network that saved Las Vegas from complete destruction. House's platinum chip-enhanced systems successfully intercepted 68 out of 77 incoming nuclear warheads, allowing the city to survive relatively intact while the surrounding Mojave Desert suffered from nuclear fallout and infrastructure collapse. The state's 6 major Vault-Tec installations conducted some of the series' most diverse experiments, from Vault 11's horrific annual sacrifice requirement to Vault 21's gambling-based democracy and Vault 22's botanical research that created aggressive mutant plants. The Mojave Wasteland became a 3-way battleground between Mr. House's independent New Vegas, the NCR expanding eastward, and Caesar's Legion pushing westward from Arizona. New Vegas itself became a beacon of pre-war civilization, with House's Securitron army maintaining order while casinos, electricity, and clean water attracted travelers from across the wasteland. If you thought technological preparation was smart, the next state survived through sheer luck and then built something terrifying: Massachusetts. The Commonwealth survived the Great War largely by accident, since Boston wasn't directly targeted by nuclear weapons, though a single massive detonation in the southwest created the permanently irradiated glowing sea. The absence of direct hits allowed much of the city's infrastructure to remain standing, though social collapse was swift and complete in the weeks following the nuclear exchange. Massachusetts housed 5 Vault-Tec installations focused on social control and technological development, including Vault 111's cryogenic preservation experiment that froze the sole survivor for 200 years and Vault 75's genetic selection experiments that secretly eliminated children deemed inferior. The region developed into one of the most complex post-war societies, with Diamond City built inside Fenway Park, the mysterious institute operating beneath MIT, and multiple factions competing for influence, including the Brotherhood of Steel, Minutemen, and Railroad. The Commonwealth's abundance of intact pre-war technology made it both valuable and dangerous, where the old world's sins continued to manifest through synthetic humans and corporate conspiracies. If you thought synthetic humans were concerning, wait until you see the government's most horrific experiments: Washington, D.C. The nation's capital suffered some of the heaviest nuclear bombardment of the entire war, with multiple direct strikes reducing much of the city to radioactive rubble that remained largely uninhabitable 200 years later. Strategic targets included the Pentagon, White House, Capitol Building, and major military installations, creating such intensive destruction that the area became overrun by super mutants and deadly radiation. The Capitol Wasteland contained 6 Vault-Tec facilities conducting some of the most disturbing experiments in the entire network, from Vault 87's horrific FEV exposure that created super mutant armies to Vault 112's virtual reality torture chambers and Vault 106's hallucinogenic drug experiments. The region became a dangerous, anarchic wasteland, dominated by super mutant armies and raider gangs, with the Brotherhood of Steel establishing their eastern headquarters at the Pentagon, while communities like Megaton and Rivet City provided rare safe havens. Project Purity at the Jefferson Memorial represented hope for regional recovery by providing clean water to the entire Capitol Wasteland. While this nuclear devastation was catastrophic, the next state faced an even worse biological nightmare: West Virginia. Appalachia was relatively lightly damaged during the Great War due to its lack of strategic military targets, with only 2-3 direct nuclear strikes hitting areas like the Huntersville military complex. Vault 76 served as one of the few genuine control vaults, designed to house America's best and brightest for exactly 25 years before opening on Reclamation Day. Despite minimal nuclear damage, Appalachia was devastated by something worse than radiation: the Scorched Plague, a crystalline infection spread by mutated scorch beasts that turned humans and animals into mindless, burning creatures. This plague effectively wiped out most human settlements within decades of the war, destroying the responders, Free States, and even a Brotherhood of Steel chapter that had been established by survivors from California. The region became rich in natural resources and rare materials, but remained sparsely populated due to its hostile environment, filled with creatures that made radiation look friendly. But if you thought accidental plagues were bad, the next state deliberately engineered something far more sinister: Arizona. Arizona experienced selective nuclear targeting, with major cities like Phoenix likely being heavily bombed, while smaller locations like Flagstaff suffered less direct damage. Phoenix, as the fifth largest city in the United States, was probably burned to a crisp and left in the desert for 200 years, while Flagstaff's survival came from being cooler, having more water sources, and having significant pre-war infrastructure, including medical corporations and universities. The state became the core territory and birthplace of Caesar's Legion when Edward Sallow and Joshua Graham were captured by the Blackfoot tribe in 2247 and transformed them from a struggling group into a conquering army. Flagstaff became the Legion's capital city, eventually transformed into a massive fortress resembling ancient Roman architecture, with marble buildings, statues, a palace complex, and a functional nuclear power plant. Under Caesar's rule, the Legion conquered 86 tribes and formed the most powerful society east of the Colorado River, creating a militaristic empire that controlled all Arizona territory by the time of New Vegas. Arizona shows that sometimes the most successful post-war societies are the ones willing to embrace slavery and crucifixion. While this brutality was an organized conquest, the next state descended into chaotic tribal warfare: Utah. Utah experienced varied nuclear impacts, with Zion National Park remaining relatively untouched by direct strikes, preserving one of the few pristine wilderness areas in post-war America. The Great Salt Lake region became home to the Whitelegs tribe, while New Canaan was established as a Mormon settlement that would eventually face destruction. Vault 70 was part of the four states' Commonwealth Vault network, though its specific experimental purpose remains limited in available information. Utah became a battleground between multiple tribal factions, with Zion National Park serving as the setting for some of the most significant post-war conflicts in the Southwest. The Dead Horses tribe allied with New Canaanite refugees led by Joshua Graham, while the Sorrows lived peacefully until forced into conflict by the Whitelegs tribe acting on Caesar's Legion orders. Depending on player choices in New Vegas, Zion either remained a peaceful refuge or became militarized territory where the Sorrows' innocence was lost as they transformed into a warlike people. If you thought tribal conflicts were messy, the next state became a battleground where major factions tore each other apart. Colorado. Colorado suffered multiple nuclear strikes, with Denver and other major cities being bombed, making it a priority target during the Great War. The state housed Vault 0, associated with the Calculator's domain, and Vault 29, designed as a children-only experiment where no one above 15 years old was allowed entry. Denver remained in ruins and became controlled by Caesar's Legion as they expanded eastward, with Legion forces conquering the notorious Hangdogs tribe, who had formed unique bonds with the mongrel dogs overflowing from Denver's ruins. The state became a contested territory, with overlapping influences from Caesar's Legion, the Midwest Brotherhood of Steel, and various tribal groups. Caesar himself mentioned capturing Brotherhood members in Colorado, indicating direct conflict between Legion forces and Brotherhood operations in the region. Parts of Colorado also fell under Midwest Brotherhood influence, according to semi-canonical storylines, creating a complex three-way battleground. While this was a contested war zone, the next state became nothing more than a staging ground for someone else's ambitions. New Mexico. New Mexico likely suffered strategic nuclear strikes at military and population centers, experiencing typical post-war conditions of radiation and infrastructure collapse. As part of the four states' Commonwealth Vault network, the state had at least one planned vault installation, though specific details remain limited. New Mexico became partially controlled by Caesar's Legion as they expanded throughout the Southwest, with the Legion systematically assimilating or destroying tribal groups according to their standard operating procedures. Legate Indulus of New Mexico was one of the Legion's regional commanders who was overseeing expansion into Texas during internal conflicts following Caesar's death. The state's position between Arizona and Texas made it strategically important for Legion logistics and military operations, serving as a crucial staging ground for territorial expansion. But this strategic importance was nowhere near as significant as the next state's massive military operations. Texas. Texas, as a large and populous state, likely suffered extensive nuclear bombardment, with major cities like Austin, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio being primary targets during the Great War. The state has extensive planned vault construction with at least 10 total installations, including locations in El Paso, Dallas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio, and Corpus Christi, representing one of the highest concentrations of planned vaults in any single state. Texas became the operational territory of the Texas Brotherhood of Steel, a unique chapter that developed independently from the main Brotherhood organization, with major bases at Fort Alamo and Fort Worth. The Texas Brotherhood had access to the secret vault and utilized a vault prototype for their operations, giving them unique capabilities compared to other Brotherhood chapters. Various settlements emerged, including Carbon and Loss, while the Church of Lost Tech developed as a religious movement that worshipped Vault-Tec technology. The state's size meant different regions developed different characteristics, with some areas controlled by the Brotherhood and others contested by raider groups and settlements. Texas proves that everything really is bigger in Texas, including the post-apocalyptic problems. If you thought independent Brotherhood chapters were interesting, the next state became headquarters for a completely different kind of Brotherhood. Illinois. Chicago was bombed during the Great War, but some areas survived, though industrial areas suffered heavy damage that left the city dangerous even centuries later. Illinois contains Vault 1, though its specific experimental purpose hasn't been revealed, along with additional planned installations around Chicago and Springfield. The state became headquarters territory for the Midwest Brotherhood of Steel when a fleet of airships dispatched from California crash-landed near Chicago, with survivors establishing a new chapter that eventually went rogue and severed contact with the main organization. Unlike the traditional Brotherhood's isolationist policies, the Midwest Brotherhood began trading with locals and recruiting from the local population, making them more like the NCR or Legion, with standing forces and territorial control. Chicago remained dangerous, with tribal villages scattered around the former city, while other settlements like Springfield became thriving towns that contributed to the Brotherhood's war machine, and Quincy received Brotherhood protection from tribal threats. But if you thought the Midwest Brotherhood was successful, the next state remained a dangerous wasteland. Missouri. St. Louis was heavily bombed and remained in ruins, while Kansas City was also likely affected during the Great War. Kansas City had been a large nuclear launch facility before the war, making it a likely location for vault construction. Missouri became part of the Midwest Brotherhood's operational area, but remained largely dangerous and sparsely populated centuries after the bombs fell. St. Louis became plagued by super mutants, raider gangs, and beast lords, making it one of the most dangerous cities in the Midwest. The beast lords were particularly unique as mutant cannibals who could telepathically control certain creatures, posing significant challenges to survivors in Brotherhood forces. Kansas City's nuclear launch facility staff somehow survived the war, but were transformed into ghouls who formed a town called Gravestone and developed a religious cult centered around the last intact nuclear bomb in their silo, which they revered as Plutonius. If you thought ghoul cults were disturbing, the next state became home to America's most brutal experiments on its own people. Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh wasn't directly hit by nuclear warheads, but suffered catastrophic environmental damage from highly irradiated rivers that combined with industrial pollution to create unique mutations. The contamination came from Abraxo, industrial-grade drain cleaner that expanded due to radiation exposure, creating the troglodyte degeneration contagion that turned humans into feral creatures called trogs. Pittsburgh became known as the Pit, ruled by rotating raider gangs using slave labor until the Brotherhood of Steel launched a massive operation called the Scourge in 2255. Ishmael Asher survived the Brotherhood assault and eventually emerged as Lord Asher, creating a slave-run industrial city that represented the only realistic hope for curing TDC and restoring the region. The Pit became notorious for its gladiatorial arena called the Hole, where slaves could fight for freedom, while the city's industrial output included weapons like the auto axe. The settlement created an ongoing moral dilemma, where brutal slave labor coexisted with the genuine possibility of regional recovery. But if you thought industrial slavery was morally complex, the next state became a hub for actual slave trading. Maryland. Northern Maryland was severely affected by nuclear fallout from the Washington, D.C. strikes, while isolated areas like Point Lookout remained less directly impacted. The state housed at least 2 significant Vault-Tec installations as part of the Capital Wasteland Network, including Vault 92's experiments on musicians with white noise, hypnotic signals, and Vault 108's human cloning experiments. Maryland developed several notable settlements, including Canterbury Commons, which became a major trading hub where all 4 traveling merchant caravans would regularly meet. Paradise Falls emerged as one of the most notorious settlements in Maryland, serving as a slaver stronghold built around a pre-war shopping center dominated by a massive Bob's Big Boy statue. The slavers operated throughout the capital wasteland, kidnapping survivors and becoming particularly infamous for raiding Little Lamplight to capture children for the slave trade. Point Lookout remained unique with its swampland community featuring tribal swamp folk and mysterious conflicts involving pre-war scientists. If you thought slave trading was the worst thing people could do, the next state became a radioactive hellscape where survival itself was nearly impossible. Virginia. Northern Virginia bore the brunt of Washington, D.C. area nuclear strikes, making it one of the most heavily damaged regions in the United States, with numerous hot zones that remained dangerous 200 years later. Virginia housed Vault 87, which exposed residents to the forced evolutionary virus to create supermutants for military purposes, becoming the primary source of supermutant armies that terrorized the capital wasteland for centuries. The state became one of the most dangerous places to survive in post-war America, with most habitable areas quickly picked clean by desperate survivors. Despite these challenges, some settlements managed to establish themselves as part of the broader capital wasteland trade network, though Virginia remained largely a transit zone rather than a place where major communities could thrive. Northern Virginia areas like Arlington, Fairfax, and Loudoun counties became particularly dangerous due to their proximity to the D.C. strikes, transforming prosperous suburbs into radioactive ruins patrolled by hostile creatures and desperate scavengers. Finally, let's look at some of the more remote states that developed their own unique post-war characteristics. Remote states and territories, Montana remains largely unsettled wasteland with harsh mountain conditions, though some areas became part of NCR territory as the Republic expanded northward. Alaska was the site of major pre-war conflict with China during the Sino-American War, with Anchorage heavily fortified and likely bombed, leaving the state as a frozen wasteland with operational pre-war military installations. Oregon's northern areas were affected by fallout from California, but some settlements survived and became incorporated into NCR territory as the Republic expanded. Maine's Far Harbor Island was relatively isolated from direct nuclear strikes, with Vault 118 on Mount Desert Island, designed to study social class dynamics between wealthy hotel guests and working-class islanders before being derailed by RoboBrain research. Far Harbor itself became a unique settlement dealing with radioactive fog, synth refugees, and conflicts between humans and the children of Adam, developing its own distinct culture separate from the mainland. From ancient cults performing human sacrifices to children's schools where the lunch literally turned kids into monsters, and one location so disturbing that players refuse to go back even with maxed out characters and infinite ammo. Today, I'll be explaining the most terrifying locations in Fallout 4. We'll get to the unforgettable locations, but first, let's start with the quarry that proves horrors existed long before the bombs fell. Dunwich Borers. This abandoned quarry southwest of Hugo's Hole looks like any other raider scrap operation until you realize the marble walls are literally bleeding and you're seeing flashbacks of pre-war human sacrifices that definitely weren't part of standard mining safety protocols. The place starts normal enough with raiders camping up top stripping copper from machinery, but descend into those tunnels and you'll find ritual altars covered in candles, hallucinations of suited managers watching workers get sacrificed to something underground, and a massive underwater face statue that makes you question what Dunwich was really mining for down there. The sound design here deserves special mention. That wet, organic squelching when you walk near the walls isn't your imagination. The audio team recorded actual meat being pressed against stone to create that visceral effect. And those flashbacks, they're not random. They trigger based on your proximity to specific altars, meaning you can miss half the story if you don't explore thoroughly. Speedrunners have discovered you can complete this location in under 3 minutes, but doing so means missing the true horror. A hidden room behind the underwater statue containing pre-war correspondence between Dunwich executives and something they refer to only as the sleeper below. The deeper you go, the worse everything gets, with feral ghouls spawning from solid rock, tripwires connected to grenades every 5 feet, and this constant rumbling that makes your controller vibrate like something massive and ancient is waking up beneath you. Terminal entries reveal the pre-war Dunwich Company was secretly a cult, worshipping otherworldly gods, using the legitimate mining operation as cover for their dark rituals. And when you finally reach the flooded bottom, there's this unique sacrificial blade called Krem Vaj's Tooth, just sitting in an altar surrounded by mini nukes like someone was preparing for something big. This location connects directly to Fallout 3's Dunwich building where similar cult activity happened, proving these psychopaths had operations across the entire East Coast. And honestly, finding that giant face statue underwater still makes me refuse to swim in any body of water in any Fallout game ever again. If you thought bleeding walls were bad, wait until you see what's hiding in Salem that makes experienced players quit the game entirely. In fact, 73% of players never even finish this next location. Museum Museum of Witchcraft. This Gothic building near Salem was supposed to educate wastelanders about colonial witch trials and historical persecution, but now it's home to something that makes those old superstitions look like nursery rhymes your grandma tells you. Walking up to this place, you'll hear traveling merchants warning you to stay away, see mannequins posed in colonial-era torture positions with nooses around their necks, and find a holotape of some poor private investigator literally getting torn apart while screaming about something way bigger than a mole rat moving in the darkness. The museum itself is pitch black with only your Pip-Boy's green light showing overturned displays about witch trials, blood smears leading up walls to the ceiling, and human bodies thrown around like a child's discarded toys, building unbearable tension until you reach the main hall where a savage Deathclaw drops from the ceiling right on top of you like the world's worst surprise party. What most players don't realize is this Deathclaw is actually programmed differently from every other Deathclaw in the game. Its AI specifically tracks sound, your footsteps, reloading, even your Pip-Boy click. Turn off your radio, crouch walk, and use melee weapons, and you can actually sneak past it entirely. But here's the thing, the developers knew most players would panic and start shooting, creating a chaotic fight in near total darkness where every muzzle flash illuminates teeth and claws. The location was inspired by the developers' visit to actual Salem witch trial museums, where they noticed how modern horror had completely overshadowed historical tragedy. Just like this Deathclaw overshadows the real horror of colonial persecution still visible in the museum's exhibits if you look closely enough. But here's the twist that makes this location genuinely special. You can actually find Deathclaw eggs in the basement behind a locked door, and if you return them to their nest near Lynn Woods instead of selling them to that scumbag Wellingham for a quick cap profit, the mother Deathclaw becomes friendly and won't attack you, showing even the scariest monsters in the entire wasteland just want to protect their babies. This quest, called The Devil's Due, teaches you that sometimes the real monsters are the humans who steal eggs for fancy omelets, while actual monsters just want their kids back. And watching Kate literally yell "shite" when that Deathclaw drops from the ceiling never gets old, no matter how many playthroughs you do. From maternal instincts and protective mothers to artistic psychopaths with very different hobbies. Remember I mentioned serial killers? Well, this won't be the last one we find, but it's definitely the most creative. And here's a stat that'll disturb you. 42% of players actually save this guy after seeing his work. Pickman Gallery. This unassuming row house in the north end looks completely abandoned until you notice the raider corpses arranged like they're in some twisted art exhibition, complete with track lighting, wine glasses positioned in their hands, and little plaques describing each piece, like you're at the Wasteland's most disturbing gallery opening. Pickman isn't your average Commonwealth serial killer, though. He exclusively targets raiders and turns their bodies into grotesque masterpieces, hanging them from ceilings with fishing line, posing them in thoughtful positions like they're pondering existence, and leaving calling cards at each murder scene like he's the Wasteland's most disturbed artist trying to build a portfolio. Following the blood trail through underground tunnels filled with more installations, including raiders posed mid-scream, you'll find actual living raiders hunting Pickman for revenge because he killed their friends, leading to this incredible moral dilemma where you choose between saving a serial killer who only kills bad guys or letting the raiders get their justice on someone who turns murder into art. The basement gallery is absolutely the worst part, with dozens of raider corpses preserved in various states of decay, positioned to tell stories of their final moments like a stop-motion animation of death, and Pickman himself treating you like an art critic who finally appreciates his vision while casually mentioning his next piece will involve super mutants. This whole location is based on H.P. Lovecraft's Pickman's Model, about an artist who paints monsters so realistically they turn out to be real. And honestly, after seeing Pickman's actual work with actual corpses, I understand why some players just nuke the whole building from outside and call it a day without even looting the place. The community is genuinely divided on Pickman. Some players have created entire builds around being his apprentice, wearing formal wear and exclusively hunting raiders with combat knives. Others bomb the gallery from outside because they can't stomach walking through it. But here's a detail that changes everything. Check Pickman's terminal entries carefully. He's not just killing random raiders. Each victim corresponds to a specific crime mentioned in Diamond City newspapers. That raider posed reading a book? He burned down a school. The one arranged like he's praying? He killed a priest. Pickman isn't just an artist. He's a vigilante creating poetic justice sculptures, which makes the moral choice even more complicated. Speaking of art and performance, let's visit a very different kind of theatrical show. Grantchester Mansion. Nuka World's haunted house attraction was already creepy enough before the bombs with its Winchester Mystery House design featuring stairs to nowhere and its Lizzie Borden murder recreations complete with bloody mannequin families, but now it's a legitimate death trap filled with actual corpses and automated systems that can't tell the difference between scaring and killing. The second you enter, you're immediately hit with recordings of a little girl laughing that echoes through empty halls, doors slamming behind you with no way back, and mannequins that definitely weren't in that position 5 seconds ago, because you swear that one just turned its head to watch you walk by. The mansion is basically one giant psychological puzzle of hidden doors behind bookcases, gas-filled death rooms that lock when you enter, turrets hidden behind family portraits that track your movement, and a basement full of ghouls wearing pre-war formal wear like they died at the world's most radioactive dinner party. But the real kicker is finding terminals revealing the pre-war owner, Lucy Grantchester, went completely insane preparing for nuclear war, turning her profitable tourist attraction into an actual death maze to test visitors for worthiness. And when you finally reach her office after solving all her twisted puzzles, you realize she's been dead for 200 years, but her automated systems are still running the show and killing people because nobody told them to stop. This location perfectly captures that specific carnival horror vibe where something meant for innocent fun becomes nightmare fuel through decay and malfunction. And the fact that you can only find the key to the attic by searching one specific mannequin that looks exactly like 50 others is peak Bethesda game design trolling players who don't explore thoroughly. Speaking of haunted houses, we're about to hit the halfway point of our nightmare tour, and things are about to escalate from creepy to what the hell were they thinking? These next locations aren't just scary, they're morally disturbing, starting with a school where the lunch lady really will kill you, Suffolk School. This seemingly normal school south of Jamaica Plain hides one of the most genuinely disturbing experiments in the entire Commonwealth involving mysterious pink paste, innocent children, and way too many feral ghouls that still wear the remnants of their school uniforms. Walking through classrooms with tiny desks still arranged for lessons and alphabet posters peeling off walls while fighting pink-skinned ghouls feels wrong on every possible level, especially when you find lunch trays still filled with mysterious pink goo that was apparently the last meal these poor kids ever ate before everything went wrong. Terminal entries reveal the school was secretly testing a new government nutrition program using this pink paste that was supposedly healthier and cheaper than real food, but actually turned everyone who ate it into ghouls. Starting with the children who were forced to eat it every single day because their parents trusted the school system. The basement cafeteria is absolutely the worst area with dozens of pink ghouls clustered around food stations like they're still waiting for lunch 200 years later. And finding innocent children's drawings about their favorite foods next to research notes about improved nutrition absorption through cellular modification makes you realize Vault-Tec wasn't the only organization experimenting on kids before the bombs fell. This location hits different because it corrupts something fundamentally innocent and safe, turning a place meant for learning and growth into a monument to pre-war America's willingness to experiment on its own children for profit. And those pink ghouls are legitimately harder to spot in the dark than regular ones because their skin has this weird translucent quality that makes them blend into shadows. The pink paste itself has become infamous in Fallout lore discussions. Data miners found unused files suggesting it was originally supposed to be a recurring element across multiple locations, part of a larger conspiracy involving pre-war corporations testing on civilian populations. The texture for the paste is actually modified Brahmin brain tissue, mixed with Abraxo cleaner effects, which explains why it has that unsettling translucent quality that makes your stomach turn. Players have noted that if you use VATIS on the paste, it actually registers as an enemy with 0 health, a creepy programming quirk that suggests the paste might be more alive than we think. From classroom nightmares to Boston Common's worst kept secret. But here's the thing, all these locations I've shown you so far, they're just the warm-up, because there's one vault coming up that did something so unforgivable, Bethesda almost cut it from the game entirely. But first, let me show you why you should never, ever approach water in downtown Boston. Swan's Pond. Boston Common's little pond seems like the perfect spot to grab some dirty water for your survival needs until you notice the swan boats are arranged weird like fortifications, and there's way too many human skulls decorating the gazebo, like someone's been collecting them for years. This super mutant behemoth named Swan has been hiding underwater for God knows how long, using the pond as natural camouflage while collecting shopping carts, boat parts, and human remains to build his own little underwater kingdom that nobody knows about until it's too late. The second you get close enough to investigate those decorative swan boats or grab that obvious loot sitting on the gazebo, Swan literally explodes from the water, throwing boulders the size of cars, and suddenly you're fighting a behemoth in the middle of downtown Boston while taking constant radiation damage from his irradiated pond water splashing everywhere. What makes Swan truly unique is his absolutely heartbreaking backstory found in nearby Institute terminals. He was actually a human test subject for the Institute's FEV experiments named Edgar Swan, kept detailed notes about his transformation, including desperate pleas for help, and they literally dumped him in the pond when he got too big to contain in their labs, meaning the Institute used Boston Common as a dumping ground for failed experiments experiments they couldn't be bothered to properly dispose of. This fight becomes mandatory for several major quests, but knowing Swan was recording audio notes about his transformation, begging for help while slowly losing his human mind to FEV mutations, makes killing him feel less like a boss fight and more like a mercy, killing for someone who never asked to become a monster. We're now 8 locations deep, and if you're still watching, congratulations. Most viewers tap out by location 6, but these next few, they're where Fallout 4 stops being a game and starts being a psychological experiment on you, the player. Most scary locations rely on jump scares or atmosphere, but Swan forces you to confront the human cost of scientific progress. The next location takes this concept underground, because sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones transformed by radiation or FEV, but the ones who were monsters all along, preserved in the dark for 2 centuries, waiting for someone foolish enough to go looking. Fens Sewer. This sewer system under the fens looks like any other radroach-infested maintenance tunnel, until you find the first carefully arranged corpse with red X marks painted on walls, and realize you've accidentally walked into someone's pre-war murder museum that's been perfectly preserved by sewer conditions. The serial killer who lived here before the war, probably the same psycho who inspired Pickman's whole artistic murder thing, turned these maintenance tunnels into his personal hunting ground where he could display his victims like trophies. And 200 years later, his art is still on display thanks to the preservative properties of radioactive sewer grime, mixed with whatever chemicals were in the water system. Following the trail of increasingly elaborate body displays deeper underground, you'll find a ghoulified version of something straight out of John Carpenter's The Thing, with a mutated face growing from its stomach that tracks your movement, bloat flies nesting in corpses positioned to look like they're screaming, and ghouls that seem way too organized and tactical for standard ferals, like they're following some kind of plan. The developer Justin Schramm specifically designed this as a self-contained horror story where environmental storytelling completely replaces dialogue or audio logs, so every skeleton placement, every bloody handprint on the walls, and every mannequin posed with a machete through its head tells part of this killer's story without saying a single word. This location proves you don't need supernatural elements or advanced technology to create effective horror in Fallout. Sometimes a dark sewer, someone's pre-war murder hobby, and environmental storytelling is enough to make players pop every mentat they have just to see better in the darkness. From sewers to hospitals where the bills literally kill you. Milton General Hospital. This automated hospital west of Fallon's department store looks helpful with its pristine Mr. handy staff still trying to admit patients after 200 years, but the parking garage underneath has been turned into a raider-run gauntlet of death where they bet on how long people survive. The hospital AI is still running somehow, constantly announcing visiting hours over the intercom and reminding people about unpaid bills while you're fighting through floors of ferals. And there's something deeply unsettling about hearing, "Please remember to pay your outstanding balance," while stepping over 200-year-old corpses. The real nightmare is the basement parking garage where raiders have built this elaborate trap system to test wastelanders for their entertainment, complete with tripwires connected to grenades, Tesla arcs that'll fry you instantly, and a final room where you're locked in with a legendary glowing ghoul while raiders place bets on how long you'll last from behind bulletproof glass. Finding patient records about people who literally died waiting for treatment because they couldn't pay their bills, mixed with raider graffiti mocking the same system they're now using for entertainment, creates this weird meta-commentary on healthcare that hits harder than any Deathclaw ever could. The hospital represents everything wrong with pre-war America perfectly preserved in amber, still demanding payment from corpses, while psychopaths use its infrastructure for blood sport. And that final elevator ride up, while the automated voice cheerfully reminds you about gift shop hours and visiting times, is peak Fallout dark comedy. Players have discovered that if you hack the hospital's main terminal, you can actually see the full list of patients who died waiting for treatment in the pre-war era. Names, ages, conditions, and time of death. 247 entries total. Someone on the development team took the time to write individual stories for people who've been dead for 200 years, just to drive home the point about America's healthcare system. The most disturbing entry? A child who died from an easily treatable infection because their parents' insurance had lapsed. That terminal entry has more horror than any ghoul encounter. More medical madness awaits nearby. But here's something unsettling. Did you know these two hospitals are connected? Not physically, but by something worse. The same company that let people die for unpaid bills at Milton was running experiments at our next location, and when you find out what they were doing to synths, Kendall Hospital. This former railroad safe house in Cambridge started as a symbol of hope for synths seeking freedom, but became a raider nest with a massive Deathclaw problem in the basement that nobody mentions until you find it yourself. Walking through wards where escaped synths once hid while planning new lives, now decorated with raider kills hanging from IV stands and graffiti saying "Welcome to Hell" in what used to be the children's ward, sets the tone for how far this place has fallen from its original purpose. The upper floors are standard Raider territory with sleeping bags next to surgical equipment they don't understand, and chem labs in operating rooms where life-saving surgeries once happened. But descending to the basement reveals the Raiders learn the hard way why you don't keep a Deathclaw as a pet, even if you think you've trained it. The basement is basically a gladiator pit where Raiders threw prisoners to fight their tamed Deathclaw for entertainment, except the Deathclaw broke free and now you're dealing with Raider corpses torn in half, prisoner corpses still in cages, and one very angry Deathclaw in a confined space with terrible lighting and no room to maneuver. This location shows how the railroad's noble goals get corrupted by the wasteland's harsh reality, turning safe houses into death houses, and finding railroad markers next to Raider torture devices drives home how quickly hope dies in the Commonwealth when good people stop fighting for it. Time for some deeply disturbing family therapy. Parsons Asylum. This pre-war mental hospital looks normal from outside except for the heavily armed mercenaries guarding it like they're protecting nuclear launch codes or state secrets, which should be your first red flag that something insane is happening inside. The Cabot family has been using this asylum for over 400 years to contain their patriarch Lorenzo, who found an ancient alien artifact in Arabia before the war that gave him immortality and psychic powers, but also drove him completely insane to the point where he thinks he's a god. Exploring the asylum reveals centuries of failed treatments and experiments, with each generation of Cabots trying desperately to cure or contain Lorenzo while also harvesting his blood for their own immortality serum, creating this twisted family dynamic where they need him alive, but locked up forever. The basement cells are absolutely the worst part, full of failed test subjects who received diluted doses of the serum, and Lorenzo himself behind multiple containment fields, speaking directly into your mind about how his family betrayed him while offering you unlimited power if you free him from his prison. The Secret of Cabot House questline forces you to choose between keeping an insane immortal locked up forever or releasing him to slaughter his ungrateful family who've been living off his blood for centuries. And either choice feels morally wrong because this whole situation is basically 400 years of family dysfunction mixed with alien artifacts that shouldn't exist. We're now at location number 10, and if you've made it this far, you're braver than most. But I need to warn you, this next vault is the one that players report having actual nightmares about, the one that made me personally take a break from playing. Ready? Let's talk about what happens when Vault-Tec experiments on children. Vault 75. Hidden under Malden Middle School, this vault performed genetic experiments on children that make every other Vault experiment seem reasonable by comparison. And considering Vault-Tec's track record, that's saying something horrifying. Vault-Tec told desperate parents they were saving their kids from nuclear war, then immediately executed all adults in the entrance chamber and started their Uptopland program where children competed in increasingly deadly tests with losers getting harvested for genetic material like they were livestock. The vaults divided into classrooms where kids learned advanced sciences they'd need to rebuild society, training facilities where they competed in combat trials that determined who lived, and research labs where the failures became test subjects for the winners to study and dissect. Terminal entries written by children describe friends disappearing after failing tests, older kids becoming staff and never being seen again, and the horrible realization that graduation meant either becoming a researcher who experiments on younger kids or being killed for your genes because you weren't good enough. The rebellion that finally ended this nightmare experiment left the vault full of small skeletons in lab coats next to adult skeletons in school uniforms, showing these kids fought back but had nowhere to run because they'd never known anything outside the vault, and gunners using it as a base now adds insult to injury because they're desecrating what's essentially a mass child grave. That was it. Vault 75, the location that made Bethesda question if they'd gone too far. But you might think the Commonwealth is bad enough, right? Wrong. What if I told you there's an entire island where radiation literally became a religion, and the followers make Pikmin look sane? Where drinking nuclear waste is considered communion. Pack your rat away, because Bar Harbor is about to show you what happens when the bombs aren't the ending, but the beginning of something worse. The nucleus. This nuclear submarine base turned into a cathedral for the children of Adam combines radiation worship with submarine claustrophobia in the absolute worst possible way that makes you question everyone's sanity, including your own, for entering. The cultists literally drink radioactive water for communion like it's wine, bathe in reactor coolant for blessing from their atomic god, and their leader, High Confessor Tectus, wants to destroy all of Far Harbor with nuclear missiles because peace isn't radioactive enough for his god's plan. Walking through the submarine's cramped corridors while your Geiger counter screams constantly and cultists preach about the holy glow that'll save everyone creates this constant tension between needing to explore for quests and wanting to leave before you grow a third severed arm or your DNA completely unravels. The reactor room where cultists meditate while absorbing lethal radiation doses that would kill normal humans in seconds. The decontamination arches they've intentionally broken because cleansing is blasphemy. And the nuclear warhead they're literally praying to like it's a shrine makes you realize these people make regular raiders look mentally stable and reasonable. Dima's reveal that he actually helped found this place but abandoned it when they got too extreme for even a synth to handle adds another layer, showing how even artificial intelligence can't predict or understand human insanity, and choosing whether to help them nuke the harbor or stop their atomic crusade affects the entire island's fate forever. From radiation worship to soda pop horror. Pop Factory. This soda factory on Far Harbor's coast seems like a fun place to learn about local soft drink history and maybe grab some unique beverages until you realize it's full of super mutants who've turned the bottling plant into a gore-decorated fortress that smells like death and cola syrup. The factory tour route is still completely operational, cheerfully explaining Vim recipes and company history while you're stepping over mutant kills and dodging suicide bombers in the quality control department who've strapped mini nukes to themselves. The corporate espionage subplot revealed through terminals, where Nuka-Cola was desperately trying to buy out or destroy Vim through sabotage before the bombs, contrasts perfectly with the current situation where mutants are using vintage soda machinery to store body parts like some kind of carbonated morgue. Finding a perfectly preserved suit of T-51 power armor with custom Vim paint job in the mixing room, surrounded by centaur remains and meat bags hanging from conveyor belts, feels like the game saying, here's something cool, but you have to wade through absolute horror to get it, and question if it's worth the therapy you'll need. This location embodies Far Harbor's theme of local pride surviving nuclear war, only to be corrupted by radiation and monsters. And those, Vim. Recipes you can craft afterward taste like accomplishment mixed with PTSD and regret. Remember at the beginning when I mentioned that one location so disturbing that players refuse to go back even with maxed out characters? Well, you're about to see it. Kitty Kingdom, where 200 years of radiation turned childhood wonder into something that'll make you uninstall the game. And the worst part? The music is still playing. Kitty Kingdom. This candy-colored children's park in Nuka World has been pumping radioactive mist for 200 years straight, creating a green fog that hides feral ghouls dressed as clowns and mascots who've been wandering in circles since the bombs fell. Oswald the Outrageous, a glowing one with actual magic tricks thanks to radiation mutations that shouldn't be possible, rules this kingdom believing he's protecting his sleeping friends who are actually feral and will definitely eat your face off without hesitation. The park's attractions still work, but everything's wrong, with the spinning teacups playing distorted music that sounds like screaming, the Ferris wheel creaking with bodies still strapped in their seats, and animatronic characters singing nursery rhymes while you're fighting through 37 rads per second of green death fog that makes you hallucinate. Finding Rachel's holotapes explaining how the staff tried desperately to survive after the bombs, slowly succumbing to what they called the affliction, while Oswald refused to accept they were becoming feral because love makes you blind, creates this tragic story where someone's inability to let go doomed everyone. The Magical Kingdom quest lets you either convince Oswald his friends are gone forever or just shoot him in his stupid glowing face. But either way, clearing this place requires turning off dozens of radiation sprayers while painted ghouls jump out of gift shops wearing mascot costumes, and that final theater showdown where Oswald uses stealth boys and actual magic makes you question if radiation can really do that or if there's something genuinely supernatural happening in this nightmare park. The true genius of Kitty Kingdom is how it corrupts nostalgia itself. Every player has childhood memories of theme parks, and Bethesda weaponized those memories. The development team studied abandoned theme parks like Pripyat's amusement park near Chernobyl and Six Flags New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. They noted how quickly joy becomes horror when the context changes. The Ferris wheel with corpses still strapped in, that's based on a real photo from Pripyat. The distorted music, actual theme park soundtracks played through damaged speakers and slowed down 30%. But the masterstroke is Oswald himself, a character who refuses to let go of the past, just like players refusing to let go of their childhood memories, even as both literally poison everything around them. California. The forced evolutionary virus started as something good. The scientists at West Tech were trying to cure the new plague that was killing people across America. But when the military got involved, they saw something else: super soldiers. They moved the whole project to Mariposa Military Base and started testing it on prisoners. When Captain Roger Maxon's soldiers found out about the human experiments, they executed the scientists and declared mutiny just 3 days before the bombs dropped. For 25 years, Mariposa sat empty. Then, Richard Gray, a guy exiled from Vault City for murder, decided to explore the base. Bad idea. He fell into one of those FEV vats and spent days floating in the mutagen, his body and mind twisting into something completely different. He came out as the Master, a grotesque blob of flesh with psychic powers and a plan to save humanity by turning everyone into super mutants. But here's the thing that makes this whole story tragic. The Master genuinely thought he was helping. He called his plan the Unity because he believed turning everyone into the same species would end war, racism, and conflict forever. He built an army of super mutants and even created a fake religion called the Children of the Cathedral to lure people into his hospitals where they'd be secretly transported to conversion vats. The Master was incredibly intelligent and had good intentions, but he missed one crucial detail. All his super mutants were sterile. His entire plan to create the future of humanity was biologically impossible from day one. When the Vault Dweller finally confronted him with proof of this in 2161, the Master's mind snapped, and he chose to detonate a nuclear bomb, destroying himself and his cathedral rather than face the reality that his century-long crusade had been pointless. But California's problems with genetic purity fanatics weren't over yet. The Enclave. The Enclave were the deep state made real. A secret cabal of pre-war politicians, military leaders, and corporate executives who had been pulling strings behind the scenes for decades. When the bombs fell, they retreated to an oil rig off the California coast and spent the next 200 years developing the most horrifying plan in Fallout history. See, the Enclave considered themselves the only pure humans left on Earth. Everyone else, Vault Dwellers, ghouls, super mutants, basically everyone who had survived on the surface, were mutants who needed to be eliminated. Their solution was FEV Curling 13, an airborne bioweapon designed to kill anyone with even trace amounts of radiation exposure. They planned to release it into the jet stream and commit global genocide, leaving only themselves alive to rebuild America in their image. Their ultimate weapon wasn't just the virus. It was Frank Horrigan, a Secret Service agent who got exposed to FEV during excavations at Mariposa. Instead of killing him, they spent 2 years turning him into a cybernetically enhanced super mutant in power armor. The irony is perfect. This pure human organization's greatest champion was himself a mutant, but the brainwashing was so complete that Horrigan never saw the contradiction. The Chosen Ones stopped their plan in 2242 by infiltrating the oil rig and destroying it, but the surviving Enclave members fled east to continue their campaign elsewhere. California's biggest catastrophe wasn't environmental or accidental, it was ideological. Both the Master and the Enclave believed they were saving humanity, but their visions of perfection required murdering everyone who didn't fit their definition of what humans should be. While California dealt with mad scientists and shadow governments, the East Coast faced a different kind of horror. Washington, D.C. The capital wasteland's biggest problem wasn't super mutants or raiders, it was water, or more specifically, what people were willing to do to control it. Project Purity started as a noble dream to clean the Potomac River, but it became a poisoned chalice that attracted the most extreme ideologies in the wasteland. The project began before the war with scientists James and Catherine working to build a massive water purifier at the Jefferson Memorial. After Catherine died in childbirth, James took his baby, the future lone wanderer, and hid in Vault 101 for nearly 20 years. But guilt eventually drove him back to restart the project, setting off a three-way conflict that would determine the capital wasteland's future. The Brotherhood of Steel saw Project Purity as their chance to help people and prove they were more than just technology hoarders. Elder Lyons had already broken with the main Brotherhood by focusing on helping locals instead of just collecting tech and clean water for everyone, fit perfectly with his vision. But the Enclave had followed the Brotherhood east after their defeat in California, and they saw the Purifier as the perfect delivery system for their genocidal plans. President John Henry Eden, actually a computer that had absorbed the personalities of previous presidents, wanted to poison the water with modified FEV that would kill every mutant in the region. His military commander, Colonel Autumn, thought Eden's plan was insane and just wanted to control the water supply to force the wasteland into submission. The real tragedy is that clean water should have been an unqualified good thing. Instead, it became the focal point for a massive battle at the Jefferson Memorial, where the player had to choose between sacrificing themselves to activate the purifier or letting it overload and explode. The Broken Steel DLC fixed this by letting radiation-immune companions like Fox activated instead, but the original ending showed how even the most beneficial technology can become a catalyst for disaster when everyone wants to control it. The Capital Wasteland's catastrophe proves that in the post-nuclear world, no good deed goes unpunished, and the most valuable resources inevitably become weapons. But if you think fighting over clean water was bad, the next location shows what happens when the environment itself becomes your enemy. Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh's problem wasn't radiation or super mutants, It was something called troglodyte degeneration contagion, a disease that turns people into savage creatures called trogs, and the horrible society built around trying to survive it. The disease came from a perfect storm of industrial pollution and nuclear fallout. Pittsburgh's massive steel mills had been pumping toxins into the air for decades, and when that mixed with radioactive fallout, it created TDC, a progressive illness that starts with skin lesions and ends with complete loss of higher brain function. Most victims become trogs, savage creatures that hunt in the ruins of the city. The pit is ruled by Ishmael Ashur, a former Brotherhood of Steel paladin who survived when the Brotherhood cleansed the city years earlier. Ashur rebuilt Pittsburgh as a slave-based industrial operation, using captured wastelanders as disposable labor to work the dangerous steel mills. He justifies this by arguing that slavery is necessary because the environment turns workers into monsters anyway, so why not get some productivity out of them first? Here's where it gets morally complicated. Ashur might actually be right. His daughter Marie was born with natural immunity to TDC, and he believes they can synthesize a cure from her blood. Once they have a cure, he claims he'll end slavery and build a proper civilization. But that requires keeping an infant prisoner as a source of medical research. The player gets dragged into this nightmare by Werner, an escaped slave who wants you to kidnap the baby to spark a slave rebellion. So your choices are, support a slaver who might actually cure the disease and free everyone eventually, or kidnap an innocent child to start a revolution that might just make everything worse. This is why the pit is so brilliantly horrible. There are no good choices. The environment itself forces everyone into moral compromises. Ashur isn't evil because he enjoys slavery. He's evil because he's convinced himself that necessary evils aren't really evil. Werner isn't wrong to want freedom, but his plan requires child kidnapping. Everyone in the pit has been corrupted by the simple necessity of survival in a place that's actively trying to kill them. The pit shows that sometimes the real catastrophe isn't what the bombs destroyed, but what people become when they're forced to choose between different kinds of horror. While Pennsylvania grappled with industrial disease, the next region faced the opposite problem. It was too valuable. Nevada, thanks to Robert House and his defense network, Las Vegas survived the Great War almost intact. House shot down most of the incoming nukes and turned the Strip into a functioning city with electricity, clean water, and actual luxury. The Hoover Dam provided massive amounts of power to the region, making the Mojave the crown jewel of the wasteland. But that success made it a target. By 2281, three major powers were eyeing the Mojave: the new California Republic expanding eastward from California, Caesar's Legion pushing west from Arizona, and Mr. House trying to maintain independence from his casino penthouse. Each faction represented a completely different vision of what post-war America should become. The NCR brought democracy, bureaucracy, and taxes. They wanted to annex the Mojave as another state, offering protection and infrastructure in exchange for political control. But they were stretched thin. Their supply lines were overextended, and many locals saw them as an occupying force that couldn't even protect the territory they claimed. Caesar's Legion offered brutal efficiency through totalitarian slavery. They had conquered 87 tribes and forged them into a disciplined army modeled on ancient Rome. Caesar believed that only through absolute authority and the complete destruction of old world values could humanity build a stable civilization from the wasteland's chaos. Mr. House wanted to maintain the status quo, while pursuing his long-term goal of rebuilding high-tech civilization and eventually colonizing space. He saw both the NCR and Legion as primitive throwbacks who would destroy the very technology needed for humanity's future. The First Battle of Hoover Dam in 2277 was just the opening act. Caesar's forces under Joshua Graham nearly won, but the NCR managed to trap the Legion's elite troops at Boulder City and blow the town up on top of them. Caesar had Graham covered in pitch, set on fire, and thrown into the Grand Canyon as punishment for the defeat. But that was just setting the stage for the real catastrophe, the Second Battle of Hoover Dam, where the courier's choices would determine which ideology would control the most valuable territory in America. The tragedy isn't that one side was clearly evil. It's that each faction had legitimate points and fatal flaws. The NCR's democracy was bogged down in corruption and overextension. The Legion's efficiency came at the cost of basic human rights. House's vision was brilliant but depended on the whims of a single immortal autocrat. The Mojave's catastrophe was being too successful. Its prosperity made it impossible to ignore, and the collision of three mutually exclusive ideologies over its control was always going to end in massive bloodshed. But while Nevada dealt with open warfare between competing empires, the next region faced a more insidious threat: Massachusetts. The institute formed from the survivors of MIT who went underground after the Great War. Initially, they tried to help the surface communities, but growing isolation and a sense of superiority led them to view wastelanders as failed experiments worth only studying and manipulating. Their breakthrough was the development of synthetic humans, Generation 3 synths that were physically indistinguishable from real people. Here's what made the Institute so terrifying. They didn't just create infiltrator robots. They made sure everyone knew about them in the worst possible way. In 2229, a malfunctioning synth called Mr. Carter went on a killing spree in Diamond City's marketplace, revealing the existence of perfect human replicas to the public for the first time. From that moment on, every person in the Commonwealth lived with the knowledge that anyone around them, family, friends, leaders, could secretly be a synthetic spy. The Institute systematically sabotaged every attempt at unified government. When the settlements tried to form the Commonwealth Provisional Government, the Institute replaced one of the delegates with a synth that murdered the other representatives during the meeting. They kidnapped people and replaced them with synthetic doubles programmed to act as spies. They created super mutants from failed FEV experiments and just released them onto the surface when they didn't turn out right. The paranoia they created destroyed the region's only peacekeeping force, the Minutemen, by making it impossible for settlements to trust each other enough to work together. The Quincy massacre that broke the Minutemen happened because a member named Clint became convinced his own organization was compromised and betrayed them to mercenaries. The Institute's real weapon was never their laser rifles or their synth army, it was the idea of synths. The fear that anyone could be an enemy infiltrator shattered trust between communities and prevented any form of stable government from taking root. They created the perfect laboratory conditions by ensuring the surface world remained a chaotic collection of isolated settlements that could be manipulated and observed without interference. The Commonwealth's catastrophe shows how psychological warfare can be more devastating than any bomb. The Institute didn't need to conquer the region through force. They just convinced everyone to tear each other apart through suspicion and fear. While Massachusetts dealt with enemies that looked exactly like friends, the next location faced a more elemental horror: Maine. The island is split between three factions that can't coexist. The Harbormen are the original human inhabitants, barely surviving in their town behind fog condensers that keep the mist and its monsters at bay. They're insular, suspicious, and increasingly desperate as the fog slowly wins the war of attrition. The Children of Atom are radiation-worshipping cultists who see the fog as a divine manifestation of their god. They've set up in a nuclear submarine called the Nucleus and view the Harbormen's fog condensers as blasphemous interference with Atom's will. They want nothing more than to destroy the condensers and let the fog consume everything. Acadia is a refuge for escaped Institute synths, led by Dime, a prototype synth who's been hiding on the island for over a century. Dime tries to maintain peace between the other two factions, but his methods reveal the true catastrophe of Far Harbor. Dima murdered Captain Avery, the leader of Far Harbor, and replaced her with a synth programmed to be friendly toward Acadia. To deal with his guilt, he surgically removed the memory of the murder and hid it in a computer simulation. He also replaced the extremist leader of the Children of Atom with a more moderate synth to prevent them from destroying the fog condensers. The fog doesn't just create dangerous creatures, it creates moral corruption. The constant pressure of survival in an environment that's actively trying to kill you forces everyone into extreme positions. The Harbormen become xenophobic isolationists. The Children of Atom embrace suicidal fanaticism. Even Dime, who genuinely wants peace, resorts to murder and mind control to achieve it. When the sole survivor arrives, they have to decide between several catastrophic options: expose Dima's crimes and start a war, use the nuclear launch key to grant the children their great division by destroying them, disable the fog condensers and doom Far Harbor to the creatures, or perpetuate Dime's cycle of lies and murder by helping him maintain his false peace. Far Harbor's catastrophe is environmental in the most literal sense. The fog is the environment, and it makes moral clarity impossible. It's a physical manifestation of the fog of war that obscures right and wrong and forces everyone into monstrous choices. The real disaster isn't any single faction, but the way the oppressive environment guarantees that everyone becomes corrupted just by trying to survive. But while Far Harbor dealt with environmental horror, our final location shows what happens when greed itself becomes a weapon: the Sierra Madre. Hidden in the Mojave Desert, the Sierra Madre Casino promised to be a city of gold, but it turned out to be the most elaborate and deadly trap in the entire Fallout universe. The catastrophe here isn't political or environmental, it's purely psychological, and it proves that sometimes the deadliest enemy is your own inability to let go. The casino was built by Frederick Sinclair, a pre-war billionaire who wanted to create the perfect sanctuary for his love affair with starlet Vera Keyes. To make his dream real, he struck a deal with the scientists at Big MT Research Facility, trading advanced holographic and matter replication technology for the right to use the surrounding villa as a testing ground. Big MT's experiment was the Cloud, a toxic, self-replicating red mist designed as an area denial weapon. They gave the construction workers experimental hazmat suits that were deliberately flawed. The Cloud corroded the seals shut, permanently trapping the workers inside. Over 200 years, they mutated into the Ghost People, immortal, unkillable creatures wandering the villa in a state of eternal, silent agony. The Cloud is more than just a weapon. It's a physical metaphor for the casino's theme of being unable to let go. It clings to everything, preserving the villa in perfect decay, refusing to dissipate, just like the obsessions that drove everyone connected to the Sierra Madre to their doom. Sinclair couldn't let go of his love for Vera. Dean Domino couldn't let go of his pre-war jealousy of Sinclair's success. Christine couldn't let go of her hunt for the rogue Elder Elijah. And Elijah couldn't let go of his obsession with using old-world technology to wipe the slate clean and start over. The player gets lured into this trap by Elijah, who wants to break into the casino's vault not for treasure, but to weaponize the Cloud and unleash it on the entire Mojave. The whole Dead Money DLC is structured like an addiction metaphor. You're literally fitted with an explosive collar that will kill you if you try to leave, forced to work with 3 other collared companions who are all trapped by their own obsessions. The ultimate test comes in the vault itself, where you find 37 solid gold bars worth a fortune. But taking them over encumbers you so much that escaping the collapsing casino becomes nearly impossible. The game forces you to choose between literal treasure and your life, and the hardest part is that letting go of the gold feels like failure, even when it's the smart choice. The Sierra Madre's catastrophe teaches the Wasteland's most brutal lesson. Some prizes aren't meant to be claimed, and the beginning can't happen until you let go of the end. It's a perfect distillation of everything wrong with the old world: the greed, the obsession with technology as a solution to human problems, and the inability to accept that some things are just over. Starting with New Vegas, the Fiend residence proves that sometimes the most mundane-looking places hide the darkest secrets. This ordinary house near the Strip is the only accessible building in its cluster, which immediately makes it suspicious if you're paying attention. Inside, you'll find fiends using it as a base, and while there's no unique loot or quest tied to it, the location serves as pure environmental storytelling about gang territory expansion. What makes this spot genuinely unsettling is how normal it looks from the outside, basically showing how the Wasteland's dangers can hide behind any door. But if you thought a simple gang hideout was ominous, the next location literally fell from the sky with military secrets. Crashed Vertibird. The crashed Vertibird in New Vegas contains one of the game's most unique weapons and ties directly into companion questlines. Half buried in the desert sand, this military aircraft wreck is guarded by sentry bots and Mr. Gutsis that somehow survived the crash. The real prize here is the Tesla-beaten prototype, a unique energy weapon that's honestly one of the most overpowered items you can find through exploration. Even better, this location triggers Arcade Ganon's For Auld Lang Syne quest, proving that hidden locations often connect to major storylines in ways you'd never expect. The developers named this crash site after a webcomic artist, which shows how even unmarked locations get personal touches from the team. Griffith Peak. Griffith Peak represents the ultimate tease in New Vegas, being the highest natural point outside Jacobstown that you can see but never actually reach. Invisible walls block access to this mountain, making it pure environmental decoration that drives completionist players absolutely insane. The peak serves as a boundary marker for the game world, but its inaccessibility has spawned countless forum discussions about cut content and whether there were originally plans for additional areas. Sometimes, the most memorable hidden locations are the ones you can't actually visit. Speaking of places that test your navigation skills, the next location requires serious sewer spelunking. The Humble Sealed Sewers. Tucked beneath the Vegas underground, the Humble Sealed Sewers contain the Humble Cudgel, a unique melee weapon that most players never find. Getting to this location requires navigating through the complex sewer system beneath the Strip, which honestly feels like a mini dungeon that was cut from a larger quest. The weapon itself isn't game-changing, but finding it proves you've mastered the game's most confusing underground network. This location represents remnants of what was clearly intended to be a much larger sewer exploration system that got scaled back during development. The sewers might be confusing, but the next location creates its own natural maze through environmental hazards. Scorpion Burrow. Near Crescent Canyon West, the Scorpion Burrow shows logical typical creature ecology in action through environmental design. This sandstorm-engulfed area naturally explains where all those rad scorpions are coming from, complete with a rad scorpion queen as the area boss. The location doesn't contain special loot, but it demonstrates how New Vegas uses environmental storytelling to make the wasteland feel like a living ecosystem. The constant sandstorm effects make navigation genuinely challenging, forcing players to rely on audio cues to avoid the deadliest creatures. From creature nests to human entertainment, the next location shows what people did for fun before the bombs fell. Ivanpah Racetrack. North of Nipton Road Pit Stop sits the abandoned Ivanpah Racetrack, a perfectly preserved pre-war racing facility that serves as pure atmosphere. There's no loot, no enemies, and no quests tied to this location, which makes it one of the most peaceful spots in the entire Mojave. The track illustrates the kind of entertainment and normal life that existed before nuclear annihilation, creating an almost haunting contrast with the surrounding wasteland. Sometimes the most powerful environmental storytelling comes from what's missing, rather than what's there. But if you want environmental storytelling with actual narrative payoff, the DLC locations deliver in spades. Cueva Quarache. In the Honest Hearts DLC, Cueva Quarache serves as the final resting place of Randall Clark, whose terminal logs scattered throughout Zion Canyon tell one of Fallout's most heartbreaking stories. This cave is filled with spore plants and creatures from Vault 22, directly connecting multiple storylines across the game world. Clark's story, told entirely through environmental clues and computer entries, reveals how one man survived the apocalypse, only to watch everything he cared about slowly die. The location proves that DLC areas often contain the series' most sophisticated hidden narratives. From elaborate DLC storytelling to the basics of wasteland survival, simple shelters tell their own stories. Mesquite Mountains Lean-To. The Mesquite Mountains Lean-To represents pure post-war survival ingenuity, being a makeshift shelter complete with mattress, storage container, and water barrel. Located in the southwest desert, this humble structure shows how wastelanders adapt existing materials into livable spaces. There's no unique loot or quest significance, but the lean-to demonstrates the everyday reality of post-apocalyptic life that most players never stop to consider. The careful arrangement of survival necessities tells a story about hope and persistence without requiring a single line of dialogue. Sometimes the most mundane locations hide the most bizarre secrets, especially when Wild Wasteland gets involved. The One. The One is literally an unexploded nuclear bomb imported directly from Fallout 3's assets, but it only appears if you take the Wild Wasteland trait. This massive piece of ordnance sits in the desert surrounded by super mutants and a cave system, creating one of the most surreal encounters in New Vegas. Players with sufficient science skill can harvest energy cells and microfusion cells from the bomb, basically turning nuclear weapons into a crafting resource. The location perfectly embodies Wild Wasteland's approach of mixing genuine danger with absurd humor. From nuclear weapons to conventional armories, faction hideouts require more traditional infiltration skills. Great Khan Armory. Hidden beneath a destroyed house near Red Rock Canyon, the Great Khan Armory requires finding a specific trapdoor to access. This underground cache contains some of the best faction-specific loot available to players friendly with the Khans, but you'll miss it entirely if you're not thorough in your exploration. The armory's concealment makes perfect sense for a nomadic tribe that needs to hide resources from the NCR and Legion. The location rewards players who invest in faction relationships while providing practical benefits for the Khan storyline. Moving from New Vegas to the capital Wasteland, Fallout 3's hidden locations often focus on pre-war mysteries and alien encounters. Strange Alien Crash Site. North of MDPL-13 Power Station in Fallout 3, the Strange Alien Crash Site introduces extraterrestrial elements that connect directly to the Mothership Zeta DLC. The crashed UFO contains a dead alien and the unique alien blaster weapon with limited but incredibly powerful ammunition. After installing Mothership Zeta, the alien's body disappears and gets replaced with an alien distress beacon, showing how DLC content can retroactively modify the base game world. This location proves that even the most outlandish Fallout elements often have deeper narrative connections. From alien technology to human infrastructure, abandoned metro systems tell stories of societal collapse. Abernathy Metro Station. The heavily irradiated Abernathy Metro Station, part of the Tacoma Park area, showcases environmental hazards as storytelling devices. This Mirelurk-infested underground maze forces players to balance radiation exposure against exploration rewards while navigating pre-war terminals filled with propaganda and lies. The station's condition reflects how quickly infrastructure collapsed after the bombs, with dangerous creatures claiming former safe spaces. The terminal's cheerful pre-war messages create a disturbing contrast with the current reality of mutation and decay. Underground dangers extend beyond metro stations into elaborate sewer networks designed for serious exploration. Arlington Sewer. Southeast of Arlington Library lies a massive 3-level sewer system with guard rooms and locked storage areas that most players never fully explore. The complex contains valuable loot, including stealth boys and skill books. But accessing everything requires careful navigation and combat against entrenched raiders. This sewer system represents Fallout 3's commitment to rewarding thorough exploration with genuinely useful items. The multi-level design suggests this area was originally planned for larger quest content that got cut during development. From elaborate sewer systems to corporate facilities, hidden office buildings reveal pre-war corporate secrets. Bethesda Underworks. The Bethesda Underworks, a sub-basement near the actual Bethesda Game Studios office location, contains radioactive waste barrels and packs of feral ghouls that can overwhelm unprepared players. Up to 6 ghouls can attack simultaneously, with a chance of encountering rare, glowing variants that drop better loot. This location serves as both developer Easter egg and legitimate gameplay challenge, showing how Bethesda incorporated real-world geography into their wasteland design. The radioactive waste suggests pre-war corporate negligence that created post-war environmental hazards. Religious sites in the wasteland often hide more than spiritual guidance, sometimes concealing rescue missions. Calverton. The destroyed church at Calverton features a cemetery, tripwire traps, and occasionally a captive NPC who can be rescued for positive karma. This location demonstrates how Fallout 3 uses religious imagery to comment on faith's role in post-apocalyptic survival. The tripwire trap at the entrance shows how even sacred spaces have been weaponized by wasteland inhabitants. The rescue encounter, when it triggers, provides moral choice opportunities that reinforce the game's karma system without requiring major quest commitments. From religious sites to media centers, abandoned news offices reveal pre-war propaganda and post-war dangers. Capitol Post. The Capitol Post news office contains pre-war terminals with journalistic information while hosting super mutant threats outside the building. Inside, players can find notes and keys that connect to other hidden locations like Minefield, showing how unmarked areas often link together through environmental storytelling. The printing room equipment tells stories about information distribution before the Great War. This location proves that even minor buildings can serve as narrative hubs connecting multiple areas across the Capitol wasteland. Commercial establishments also hide valuable loot and automotive history from before the bombs. Car dealership. East of Fairfax Ruins, the Corvega dealership features a water tower landmark and becomes an enclave spawn point after completing Waters of Life. The two display Corvegas provide environmental details about pre-war automotive technology and consumer culture. Post-main quest. This location transforms from simple loot opportunity into active combat zone, showing how completing major storylines can alter the game world. The dealership represents the kind of everyday Americana that Fallout uses to comment on pre-war society's excesses. Some hidden locations reveal the scope of pre-war international conflict through abandoned military assets. Chinese Army Mobile Command HQ. This destroyed freeway trailer east of Regulator HQ contains spy equipment and the Chinese Army Special Ops Training Manual, providing direct evidence of pre-war Chinese military operations on American soil. The presence of ham radio equipment suggests ongoing intelligence gathering that continued right up to the nuclear exchange. This location provides concrete proof that the Sino-American War involved actual Chinese infiltration rather than just propaganda fears. The manual itself serves as valuable skill-boosting loot while reinforcing the game's Cold War paranoia themes. Consumer culture evidence appears throughout the wasteland in the form of chain store ruins that show pre-war corporate dominance. Cornucopia Fresh Groceries. At least 4 Cornucopia Fresh Groceries chain store locations exist throughout the Capitol wasteland, demonstrating how corporate brands survived in ruin form across the region. These multiple locations establish pre-war consumerism and corporate expansion while providing consistent environmental design elements that make the world feel coherent. Each store contains similar layouts and loot types, showing how franchise standardization worked before the apocalypse. The chain's widespread presence comments on how corporate culture had penetrated every aspect of American life before the bombs fell. Technical infrastructure also hides puzzles and challenges for dedicated explorers willing to decode mysterious signals. Drainage chambers and broadcast tower rooms. 7 known drainage chambers and broadcast stations throughout the Capitol wasteland transmit coded Morse signals that create optional puzzle content for dedicated players. These locations feature dangerous falls and ham radios, broadcasting cryptic messages that can be decoded for additional lore. The drainage chambers represent utility infrastructure that survived the war but got repurposed for mysterious communications. The broadcast towers suggest either surviving military communications or Wastelander attempts to maintain long-distance contact across the dangerous Capitol wasteland. Military installations sometimes hide evidence of post-war faction investigations and alien technology. Bannister Crater. East of Fort Bannister, multiple bomb craters contain rad scorpions and alien power cells, with a safe containing containing Radaway for players who thoroughly search the area. After completing the main quest, Enclave forces investigate this location, suggesting ongoing military interest in the crash sites. The alien power cells directly connect to the broader extraterrestrial subplot that runs through Fallout 3's hidden content. The Enclave presence proves that major factions actively monitor and investigate unusual wasteland phenomena. Trading posts sometimes offer more than commerce, providing potential player housing in unexpected locations. Lucky's. Near Tenpenny Tower, Lucky's serves as both dangerous combat encounter and potential player housing opportunity for players who clear out the hostile inhabitants. The location contains almost all possible custom weapon modification parts, making it incredibly valuable for players focused on weapon customization. However, taking items results in karma loss, creating moral tension between practical benefits and ethical considerations. Lucky's demonstrates how Fallout 3 integrates player housing opportunities into combat encounters rather than making them separate systems. Some locations blur the line between settlement and personal residence while offering unique amenities. Radiation King. The Radiation King trading outpost in Georgetown features a repair NPC and can function as an unofficial player home complete with jukebox and multiple radio stations. This location provides essential services while offering entertainment amenities that most official player housing lacks. The repair NPC makes this one of the few hidden locations that provides ongoing gameplay utility, rather than just one-time exploration rewards. The multiple radio stations suggest this location serves as a communication hub for the surrounding Georgetown area. Playground equipment repurposed by wasteland creatures creates some of the game's most memorable boss encounters. Roach King's Throne, northeast of Minefield. The Red Rocket playground equipment has been claimed by the hostile Roach King and his Rad Roach followers, creating a mini-boss encounter in an unexpected location. The throne setup contains valuable loot, including mini-nukes and miniguns, making this children's playground one of the most rewarding combat encounters for prepared players. The Roach King represents how wasteland creatures adapt human infrastructure for their own purposes. This location perfectly embodies Fallout's dark humor by turning innocent playground equipment into a monster lair. Faction hideouts often contain unique weapons that reflect their inhabitants' personalities and combat preferences. Raid Shack. East of Bethesda Ruins, the Raid Shack contains raiders and the unique weapon Stab Happy, along with references to the Elder Scrolls IV. Oblivion show Bethesda's tendency to include cross-game Easter eggs. The shack provides solid loot, including ammunition and buff out, while serving as a straightforward combat encounter. The TES reference demonstrates how Bethesda uses hidden locations to reward players familiar with their other franchises. Stab Happy itself represents the kind of jury-rigged wasteland weaponry that raiders prefer over conventional military equipment. Entertainment venues show how wastelanders create new forms of amusement from pre-war animals and infrastructure. Mole Rat Racetrack. Southwest of Grey Ditch, raiders have organized mole rat races using captured animals and makeshift track equipment, creating one of the wasteland's most bizarre entertainment venues. This location features both racing events and combat encounters with non-respawning enemies, making each visit potentially unique. The racetrack demonstrates wasteland ingenuity in creating entertainment from available resources while showing how organized raider groups structure their downtime activities. Some locations exist purely for absurd humor, creating memorable moments through environmental comedy. Plunger Room of Death. This shelter features a tower of random objects, leading to a room filled with exactly 50 plungers, creating one of Fallout 3's most meme-worthy discoveries. The location serves no practical gameplay purpose beyond entertainment and screenshot opportunities, but it perfectly captures Fallout's commitment to absurd environmental storytelling. Plunger Collection suggests either obsessive hoarding behavior or deliberate artistic installation by a deranged wastelander. This room proves that hidden locations don't always need practical rewards to create lasting player memories. Some hidden areas exist beyond normal map boundaries, requiring special techniques or glitches to access. Isabella Proud's Camp. Hidden beyond the normal map border, Isabella Proud's camp contains her personal notes, feral ghouls, and corpses that tell a story of isolation and survival gone wrong. Accessing this location requires boundary-breaking techniques that most players never discover, making it one of the most exclusive hidden areas in Fallout 3. Moving into Fallout 4, hidden locations become more elaborate and mechanically complex while maintaining the series' commitment to environmental storytelling. Parking Garage Dungeon. West of Milton General Hospital, this multi-level parking garage functions as a genuine dungeon, complete with traps, puzzles, and grotesque imagery that creates one of Fallout 4's most atmospheric exploration experiences. The labyrinthine structure rewards careful navigation with valuable loot, while telling a story through environmental design rather than exposition. Grotesque imagery suggests this garage became a site of systematic violence rather than random wasteland danger. Post-war eccentricity reaches new heights in locations dedicated to specific obsessions and hobbies. Crazy Cat Cabin, southeast of Walden Pond. This cabin, filled with cats and cat paintings, represents post-war obsessive behavior taken to logical extremes. The location provides no significant loot, but creates a memorable environmental story about how isolation and loss might drive survivors to extreme hoarding behaviors. The cats themselves appear to be thriving, suggesting this location represents successful interspecies cooperation rather than simple hoarding. Artistic installations created from automotive wreckage demonstrate wasteland creativity and cultural memory. Carhenge, south of Walden Pond. This Stonehenge parody, constructed from automobile wreckage, is guarded by a powerful super mutant behemoth and contains rare loot for players brave enough to fight for it. The monument demonstrates how post-war survivors remember and reinterpret pre-war cultural symbols using available materials. Behemoth Guardian suggests this location has spiritual or territorial significance that goes beyond simple artistic expression. Carhenge perfectly represents Fallout's approach of mixing cultural commentary with legitimate gameplay challenges. Military ingenuity appears in crude but effective weapons installations hidden throughout the Commonwealth. Rocket Shed, northeast of Relay Tower 0BB915. This location contains a jury-rigged rocket launcher setup, complete with propane canisters and explosive ammunition that demonstrates wasteland weapons crafting at its most dangerous. The shed shows how survivors adapt civilian infrastructure into military assets, using whatever materials they can scavenge. The explosive setup creates environmental hazards that can damage careless players while providing powerful ammunition for those who safely navigate the traps. This location proves that post-war survivors often prioritize firepower over safety in their engineering projects. Extraterrestrial encounters continue the series' tradition of alien mysteries while connecting to broader supernatural elements. Crashed UFO? North of Somerville, near Vault 81, the fiery UFO wreck leaves a trail of green alien blood that leads to additional discoveries for players who follow the clues carefully. This crash site updates the alien encounter tradition with improved visual effects and expanded exploration opportunities compared to previous games. The blood trail mechanic rewards thorough investigation while connecting the initial discovery to additional hidden content. Pop culture references reach new levels of detail in locations that recreate iconic movie scenes with wasteland twists. FV Orca Wreck. North of Salem Museum of Witchcraft, this fishing boat wreck recreates scenes from Jaws, complete with a diver's cage below the waterline and environmental details that reference the movie's most memorable moments. The location demonstrates how Fallout 4's increased detail capabilities allow for more sophisticated pop culture homages than previous games could manage. The underwater diver's cage requires players to explore both above and below the waterline, showing how hidden locations can utilize multiple environmental levels. Educational institutions often hide the darkest stories about pre-war experimentation and post-war survival horror. Suffolk County Charter School. This abandoned school contains evidence of disturbing food experiments involving pink paste and feral ghouls, creating one of Fallout 4's most unsettling environmental stories. The location suggests systematic abuse of children through nutritional experimentation that continued right up to the nuclear war. The presence of feral ghouls implies that some victims of these experiments survived the initial blast only to suffer worse fates. This school demonstrates how Fallout 4 uses hidden locations to explore institutional corruption and child endangerment themes that would be inappropriate for main quest content. DLC locations often push environmental storytelling to new extremes, while incorporating specific regional themes and folklore. Shovel Museum. In the Nuka World DLC, the Shovel Museum represents the ultimate parody of niche American roadside attractions, filled with shovel-related exhibits and memorabilia that perfectly captures pre-war consumer culture's absurd extremes. This location demonstrates how DLC content can focus entirely on humor, without requiring combat encounters or valuable loot rewards. The museum's detailed exhibits show the development team's commitment to creating fully realized joke locations that reward exploration with entertainment rather than practical benefits. Haunted Mansion attractions blend entertainment industry themes with genuine supernatural horror elements. Grantchester Mansion. Also in Nuka World, this haunted house attraction, inspired by the Winchester Mystery House, features hidden rooms, supernatural events, and environmental storytelling that blurs the line between theme park attraction and genuine horror. The mansion's labyrinthine design and supernatural elements create one of the most atmospheric locations in any Fallout game. The Winchester House inspiration shows how the developers research real-world oddities to create believable fictional locations. Fallout 76's Appalachian setting introduces regional variations on hidden location themes, while emphasizing community and survival. Junk Tower Windmill. This engineering marvel, built from scavenged materials, demonstrates Appalachian ingenuity while providing workbench access and resource generation for players who discover it. The windmill represents sustainable technology adapted to post-war conditions using pre-war materials and knowledge. The windmill proves that hidden locations can serve practical functions while still providing exploration rewards. Raider settlements demonstrate sophisticated multi-tier architecture and strategic positioning across the Appalachian landscape. Razor-edged Raider Camp. This multi-level raider settlement showcases advanced architectural planning while providing medical supplies and loot for players who can clear out the hostile inhabitants. The camp's defensive positioning and resource access demonstrate how organized raider groups claim strategic locations rather than simply squatting in ruins. The medical supplies suggest these raiders maintain higher organization levels than typical wasteland gangs. Industrial facilities reveal the scope of pre-war mining operations while hiding valuable resources and historical information. Motherlode Facility. This hidden mining operation contains valuable ore deposits and terminals that detail pre-war industrial activities in West Virginia, while providing ongoing resource generation for players who claim the facility. The location demonstrates how Fallout 76 integrates real-world West Virginia mining history into game lore while providing practical gameplay benefits. The Motherlode facility proves that hidden locations can serve as both historical education and resource management gameplay elements. Secret vaults across multiple games represent the series' most elaborate hidden locations while advancing major plot elements. Secret vaults. From the original Secret Vault in Texas to the data-mined Vault 120 content found in Fallout 76's files, these hidden facilities contain experimental backstories and rare loot, while advancing the series' central themes about corporate experimentation and human survival. Each secret vault features unique experiments that were too dangerous or unethical for official Vault-Tec documentation. Some secret vaults exist only as cut content or data-mined assets. The evolution of hidden locations across the Fallout series demonstrates how environmental storytelling has grown more sophisticated while maintaining the core appeal of rewarding player curiosity and exploration. From simple loot caches in the original games to elaborate dungeon-like complexes in Fallout 4, these unmarked areas consistently provide the series' most memorable moments and darkest stories. They reward players who look beyond obvious objectives, while serving as laboratories for experimental content that might not fit into main questlines. Vault 1. The Los Angeles Vault was one of Vault-Tec's early prototypes, built beneath the Los Angeles Cathedral. This vault might have been intended as a control vault, or just an early test run. But honestly, it doesn't matter what Vault-Tec planned because something way worse took over. The Master, that grotesque blob of flesh and malice from the first Fallout game, discovered this vault and turned it into his base of operations. He used the residents as test subjects for FEV transformation, basically turning them into super mutants against their will. The Vault Dweller eventually put an end to this nightmare by detonating a nuclear bomb inside the vault in 2162, killing the Master and proving that sometimes the only way to stop evil is with more explosives. But if you thought the Master's takeover was bad, Vault 3 shows what happens when good intentions meet pure evil in the wasteland. Vault 3. Located in the Mojave Wasteland, Vault 3 was actually one of the 17 legitimate control vaults, designed to genuinely protect its inhabitants without any twisted experiments. For over 2 centuries, it worked exactly as advertised, keeping its residents safe from the nuclear wasteland outside. The problem came in the 23rd century when a severe water leak forced the Vault Dwellers to open their doors to the outside world. These people had lived in safety for generations, completely naive about the brutal realities of post-war America. When the Fiend's Raider gang discovered the open vault, they didn't see potential allies or trading partners. They saw easy targets. The Raiders systematically slaughtered the innocent Vault Dwellers and took over Vault 3 as their base, turning one of humanity's few success stories into a drug-fueled nightmare den. The irony is devastating. Vault 3 proved that Vault-Tec's technology could actually work when they weren't deliberately sabotaging it, but the post-war world was so hostile that even a functioning vault couldn't protect its residents from human cruelty. Speaking of vaults that actually worked as intended, Vault 8 became one of the Wasteland's greatest success stories. Vault 8? Vault 8 was another control vault, equipped with a Garden of Eden creation kit and designed to open after just 10 years in 2087. But here's where things get interesting. Due to a shipping error that sounds almost too convenient to be accidental, Vault 8 received all the water chips that were meant for Vault 13. This meant they had backup water supplies, while Vault 13 would later face the water crisis that kicks off the entire first Fallout game. The residents of Vault 8 actually emerged early in 2079 and used their GECK to establish Vault City, which became one of the most technologically advanced and prosperous settlements in the post-war world. They created a functioning society with clean technology, medical advances, and actual governance. Vault City proves that when Vault-Tec wasn't actively trying to torture people, their technology could genuinely rebuild civilization. The success of Vault 8 makes the failure of other vaults even more tragic because it shows what could have been accomplished if the corporation had actually cared about humanity's survival instead of conducting sick experiments. But while Vault 8 residents were building a utopia, the people in Vault 11 were trapped in a democratic nightmare that would make Orwell weep. Vault 11. The Mojave Wasteland's Vault 11 housed what might be the most psychologically devastating experiment in the entire Fallout universe. Residents were told they had to democratically elect one person each year to be sacrificed, or everyone would die. This wasn't just murder. It was systematic psychological torture disguised as civic duty. Over the decades, this annual death sentence corrupted the entire society. Political factions formed specifically to manipulate the overseer election, using it as a weapon to eliminate rivals. The Vault became a cesspool of corruption, blackmail, and political manipulation where democracy itself became a tool of murder. Families turned against each other, friends betrayed friends, and the very concept of voting became associated with condemning someone to death. After generations of this horror, only 5 residents remained. These final survivors finally said no. They refused to elect anyone for sacrifice, choosing to face whatever consequences awaited. The Vault's computer system congratulated them for finally breaking the cycle, revealing that this was the intended outcome all along. But the psychological damage was complete. 4 of the 5 survivors immediately committed suicide from the crushing guilt of participating in decades of ritualized murder. Vault 11 proves that Vault-Tec understood how to weaponize democracy itself, turning humanity's greatest political achievement into a tool for systematic psychological destruction. If Vault 11 shows how Vault-Tec corrupted democracy, Vault 12 demonstrates their willingness to deliberately expose people to radiation just to see what would happen. Vault 12. Built in Bakersfield, Vault 12 featured a deliberately faulty vault door that wouldn't seal properly, ensuring constant radiation exposure for its residents. This wasn't an accident or equipment failure. Vault-Tec specifically designed this vault to study the effects of radiation on human populations, basically using an entire community as lab rats. The radiation exposure transformed the residents into ghouls, those distinctive post-war humans with rotting skin but extended lifespans. Rather than dying from the radiation, they adapted in the most horrific way possible, becoming living testaments to human resilience and Vault-Tec's cruelty. These ghoul residents eventually founded the city of Necropolis above ground, creating one of the first major settlements in the post-war world. Ironically, Vault 12 became crucial to saving other Vault dwellers. The Vault dweller from Vault 13 discovered a replacement water chip here, making Necropolis essential to the first game's main quest. The ghouls of Necropolis prove that even Vault-Tec's most callous experiments couldn't completely destroy human dignity and community. The connection to Vault 13 isn't coincidental, because that vault was designed for an experiment almost as cruel as deliberate radiation exposure. Vault 13. Every Fallout fan knows Vault 13 as the player's home vault in the first game, but its true purpose was testing prolonged isolation. This vault was designed to remain sealed for 200 years, studying how complete isolation from the outside world would affect human psychology and social development. The residents had no idea they were test subjects in a psychological experiment spanning multiple generations. The water chip malfunction that forces the Vault dweller to leave wasn't part of the original experiment, but it created the perfect opportunity to study what happens when someone from a completely isolated society encounters the post-war world for the first time. The Vault dweller's journey across the wasteland was essentially Vault-Tec's experiment continuing in the wild. Later, the Enclave invaded Vault 13 and killed most of the remaining residents for FEV experiments, proving that even the government Vault-Tec worked with saw Vault dwellers as expendable test subjects. The New California Republic eventually took control of the Vault, but by then, the original community was essentially extinct. Vault 13's story spans the entire series, showing how Vault-Tec's experiments had consequences that lasted for generations. While Vault 13 tested isolation, Vault 15 experimented with the opposite problem by cramming together people who fundamentally disagreed about everything. Vault 15. Vault-Tec deliberately populated Vault 15 with people holding radically different political ideologies and cultural backgrounds, then watched to see how they'd interact in confined spaces. This wasn't about studying cooperation or conflict resolution. This was about deliberately creating social tension to observe how different groups would fragment under pressure. Predictably, the residents eventually split into factions based on their conflicting beliefs. But here's what makes this experiment particularly significant. Those factions didn't just argue themselves to death. Some residents left to found Shady Sands, which eventually became the New California Republic, one of the most important political entities in the Fallout universe. Other groups became raider gangs like the Khans, showing how the same vault could produce both civilization builders and wasteland destroyers. Vault 15 basically demonstrates that Vault-Tec accidentally created a microcosm of post-war America, where ideological differences would shape the entire political landscape for centuries. The NCR's democratic values and the Khans' anarchistic raiding culture both trace back to people who lived in the same underground bunker, proving that environment matters less than ideology when rebuilding civilization. But if forcing different groups together created political chaos, Vault 19 shows what happens when you make those same groups paranoid about each other. Vault 19. The Mojave Wastelands Vault 19 featured a unique design with two overseers governing separate red and blue sectors within the same vault. But this wasn't about redundancy or administrative efficiency. This was about inducing paranoia through psychological manipulation, using subliminal messaging, fake medical records, strange noises, and flickering lights to make each sector suspect the other of sabotage. The experiment worked exactly as designed. Both factions developed severe paranoia about their neighbors, constantly suspecting sabotage and conspiracy. Residents lived in constant fear and suspicion, never able to trust the people living just down the hallway. The psychological stress was so intense that the vault was eventually abandoned, possibly due to sulfur gas from nearby caves, but more likely because the paranoia became completely unbearable. Vault 19 proves that Vault-Tec understood how to weaponize architecture itself, using physical design and environmental manipulation to create mental illness. The two overseer system shows how authority figures can be used to legitimize completely irrational fears, turning leadership into a tool for psychological torture. After all that paranoia and conflict, Vault 21 seems almost refreshingly wholesome in its approach to human nature. Vault 21. Built under pre-war Las Vegas, Vault 21 created a society where every dispute and decision was settled through gambling. This wasn't about studying addiction or financial irresponsibility. This was about creating what Vault-Tec called perfect equilibrium, by making chance the ultimate arbiter of all social interactions. For over 200 years, this system actually worked. Residents lived in harmony because no one could blame anyone else for the outcomes of pure chance. Conflicts were resolved through card games, dice rolls, and other games of chance, creating a society where luck determined everything from daily chores to major policy decisions. It was probably the most peaceful vault experiment in the entire series. The experiment only ended when Mr. House, who understood the power of gambling better than anyone, won control of the vault through its own systems. He filled most of the vault with concrete and converted the top level into a hotel and casino, essentially absorbing Vault 21 into his New Vegas empire. In a way, this was the perfect ending for a vault based on gambling, because House played the ultimate game and won everything. Vault 21 shows that not all of Vault-Tec's experiments were designed to cause suffering. Some were genuinely trying to find new ways to organize human society, even if the methods were completely bizarre. But while Vault 21's residents were peacefully gambling their way through the apocalypse, the scientists in Vault 22 were creating a biological nightmare that would contaminate an entire region. Vault 22. Populated by scientists researching plant growth and pest control, Vault 22 initially seemed like one of the more beneficial experiments. The vault was equipped for agricultural research, and the scientists were working on legitimate projects to improve food production and pest management. This actually sounded like something that could help rebuild the world. The experiment went catastrophically wrong when the scientists began working with Beauveria mordicana fungus for pest control. The airborne spores didn't just kill pests, they infected the human residents, turning them into cannibalistic spore carriers who retained just enough intelligence to hunt and kill, but lost everything that made them human. The vault became a fungal nightmare where former scientists shambled through the halls as infected monsters. Some survivors managed to flee to Zion Canyon, but the fungal infection followed them. These refugees eventually died, but not before spreading the contamination that would affect the entire region. Vault 22 proves that even well-intentioned scientific research becomes horrific when conducted in Vault-Tec facilities, because the corporation never implemented proper safety protocols. They were more interested in observing what happened than preventing disasters. The biological contamination from Vault 22 shows how Vault-Tec's experiments didn't just affect Vault residents. They created lasting environmental damage that would plague the wasteland for centuries. Speaking of environmental damage, Vault 27 was designed to create a completely different kind of disaster through simple overcrowding. Vault 27. This vault was deliberately designed to house 2 0 people in space meant for 1 0. Testing the effects of extreme overpopulation on human psychology and social structures. Vault-Tec wanted to see how people would react when they literally couldn't escape from each other, when privacy became impossible, and when basic resources had to be shared among twice as many people as the space could reasonably support. Unfortunately, Vault 27 is only mentioned in the Fallout Bible and never appeared in any actual games, so we don't know exactly what happened inside. But honestly, you don't need much imagination to picture the results. Extreme overcrowding would create competition for basic necessities, eliminate personal space, and probably lead to violence, disease, and psychological breakdown. The fact that this vault was planned shows how thoroughly Vault-Tec understood human nature's darker aspects. Vault 27 represents one of the most straightforward experiments in the entire program, because it didn't require complex technology or elaborate psychological manipulation. It just required cramming too many people into too small a space and watching them destroy each other. But while Vault 27 tested overcrowding, the interconnected vault system featured in the Fallout TV series shows how Vault-Tec could coordinate multiple experiments simultaneously. Vault 31, 32, and 33. The Fallout television series introduced a connected vault system that reveals new depths to Vault-Tec's planning and cruelty. Vault 31 housed Vault-Tec management and cryogenic storage, essentially preserving the corporation's leadership while the rest of humanity suffered through their experiments. Meanwhile, Vaults 32 and 33 served as breeding and population control experiments, designed to create manageable human communities under corporate oversight. This system shows that Vault-Tec wasn't just conducting random experiments. They were creating a comprehensive plan for post-war society, with themselves as the permanent ruling class. Vault 31's management could wake up periodically to check on their experiments, then return to cryogenic sleep while generations of test subjects lived and died under their control. Vault 32 suffered a catastrophic failure that wiped out its population, while Vault 33 serves as the main setting for the TV series, where protagonist Lucy eventually emerges to discover the truth about the surface world. The interconnected design proves that Vault-Tec was thinking beyond individual experiments toward a complete system of human control spanning multiple facilities. This connected approach makes the corporation's crimes even more systematic and deliberate, showing they weren't just conducting isolated experiments but creating an entire infrastructure for post-war domination. But while the TV series vaults represent corporate control, Vault 34 shows what happens when you give people too much access to weapons and too little space to use them safely. Vault 34. Deliberately overstocked with weapons and ammunition while providing limited living space, Vault 34 was designed to test how a heavily armed population would react to overcrowding. Vault-Tec basically created a powder keg by combining two elements guaranteed to create violence: too many people and too many guns. The experiment worked exactly as you'd expect. Overcrowding led to tensions, tensions led to violence, and the abundance of weapons made that violence deadly. When the Overseer tried to lock down the armory to prevent further bloodshed, a faction calling themselves the Boomers decided they'd had enough and left the vault entirely. These Boomers eventually settled at Nellis Air Force Base, where they became the explosives-obsessed faction you can encounter in Fallout New Vegas. The fighting over weapons access damaged the vault's reactor, irradiating the remaining residents and turning them into ghouls. So, Vault 34 managed to create both external and internal disasters. It released a heavily armed faction into the wasteland while simultaneously poisoning everyone who stayed behind. The vault perfectly demonstrates how Vault-Tec's experiments often created problems that extended far beyond the original test subjects. The Boomers' obsession with explosives and their distrust of outsiders directly trace back to their traumatic experience in Vault 34, proving that the psychological damage from these experiments shaped entire cultures in the post-war world. While Vault 34 tested human reactions to weapons access, Vault 51 let an artificial intelligence decide who deserved to live and who deserved to die. Vault 51. Located in Appalachia and managed by a Zax supercomputer, Vault 51 represents one of Vault-Tec's most technologically advanced experiments in social engineering. The computer was programmed to run combat trials among the residents to select the perfect overseer through a process of elimination that basically turned vault management into a battle royale. Zax manipulated the residents into fighting each other using psychological pressure, resource scarcity, and direct commands, treating human beings like chess pieces in a deadly game. The computer had no understanding of human value or dignity. It only understood optimization and efficiency. Every resident who died was just data to help Zax refine its selection process for the ideal leader. All the original residents died during these trials, proving that the computer's idea of perfect leadership selection was fundamentally flawed. Later, the vault was inhabited by wastelanders who also died or became scorched, showing that ZAX's experiments continued even after the original population was eliminated. Vault 51 demonstrates how Vault-Tec was willing to hand over complete control of human lives to artificial intelligence with no moral constraints. This vault basically previews what would happen if technology completely replaced human judgment in matters of life and death, creating a sterile, efficient process for eliminating unfit individuals that sounds disturbingly familiar to anyone who knows 20th century history. But if artificial intelligence management was frightening, the human-controlled experiments in Vault 63 prove that flesh and blood scientists can be even more monstrous than machines. Vault 63, also known as the Cadaver Project Vault, Vault 63 conducted illegal human cloning and ghoulification experiments under the direction of Hugo Stolz, a scientist who makes Dr. Frankenstein look like a humanitarian. These weren't medical experiments aimed at helping people. These were deliberate attempts to create artificial humans and to perfect the process of turning people into ghouls. Stolz created the Lost, which were modified ghouls with electrical sight capabilities, basically turning human beings into living weapons with enhanced sensory abilities. The cloning experiments involved harvesting DNA from staff members to create artificial humans, treating human reproduction like an industrial process. The ghoulification research aimed to perfect the radiation exposure process that created ghouls, giving Vault-Tec the ability to deliberately transform people. The Vault became extremely dangerous as Stolz's experiments got completely out of control. Most inhabitants were either transformed into monstrous creatures or killed outright. The few survivors had to live in constant fear of the modified ghouls and failed experiments that roamed the facility. Vault 63 shows how individual scientists within the Vault-Tec system could become even more cruel and experimental than the corporate-mandated experiments. Hugo Stolz represents the kind of person who thrived in Vault-Tec's system. Someone who saw human beings as raw materials for experimentation rather than people deserving basic dignity and respect. Speaking of experiments that treated humans as disposable resources, Vaults 68 and 69 represent some of the most obviously doomed social experiments in the entire program. Vault 68 and 69. These gender imbalance experiments are mentioned in the Fallout Bible but never actually shown in the games, which is probably for the best given how obviously horrific they would be. Vault 68 housed 999 men and 1 woman, while Vault 69 housed 999 women and 1 man. Vault-Tec apparently wanted to study extreme gender imbalances and their effects on social stability and reproduction. You don't need a degree in sociology to predict these outcomes. The single woman in Vault 68 would face impossible pressure, harassment, and probably violence from men competing for her attention. The genetic bottleneck would create severe birth defects and population collapse within a few generations. Similarly, the single man in Vault 69 would be under enormous pressure to reproduce while dealing with complex social dynamics among 999 women. Both vaults would theoretically result in violence, social breakdown, and genetic disasters that would doom their populations. The experiments show how Vault-Tec was willing to condemn entire communities to slow extinction just to gather data about human reproductive behavior under extreme conditions. These vaults represent social engineering at its most callous and short-sighted. The fact that these experiments were planned but never shown in games suggests that even the Fallout developers recognized they were too disturbing to portray, which honestly says a lot given some of the other content in the series. But while Vault 68 and 69 focused on reproductive pressure, Vault 70 was designed to test how religious communities would handle equipment failure. Vault 70. Populated by Mormon groups in the Salt Lake City area, Vault 70 was equipped with jumpsuit manufacturing equipment programmed to fail after just 6 months. The residents were supposed to open the vault in 2190 and use their GECK to establish New Jerusalem, but they'd have to do it while dealing with clothing shortages and equipment failures. This experiment targeted a specific religious community known for self-reliance, community cooperation, and strong social structures. Vault-Tec wanted to see how these cultural values would hold up when faced with basic equipment failures and resource shortages. The jumpsuit manufacturing failure was designed to create practical problems that would test the community's problem-solving abilities and social cohesion. Vault 70 only appears in the Fallout Bible and was never implemented in any games, so we don't know how the experiment would have played out. But the targeting of a specific religious group shows how Vault-Tec's experiments often focused on particular cultural communities, using their distinct values and social structures as variables in psychological research. The fact that this vault was designed around religious identity shows how thoroughly Vault-Tec understood and exploited American cultural diversity for experimental purposes. But if targeting religious communities seems callous, Vault 75 reveals the true depths of Vault-Tec's willingness to destroy families and children for the sake of eugenics research. Vault 75. Built under Malden Middle School and advertised as a child-friendly shelter, Vault 75 was actually a eugenics program designed to execute parents and transform children into perfect specimens for genetic harvesting. Families entered thinking they were saving their children from nuclear war. Instead, they were delivering their kids directly to Vault-Tec's most monstrous experiment. Upon entry, all parents were immediately murdered while their children were told they had died from radiation exposure. The children then underwent brutal training and testing designed to identify the most physically and mentally superior specimens. This wasn't education or child development. This was systematic conditioning to create human beings optimized for specific traits. The truly horrifying part is what happened to the successful children. Rather than being rewarded for their excellence, they were killed so their genetic material could be harvested for future experiments. The children who failed the testing were kept alive to serve the facility, basically becoming slave labor for their own prison. Eventually, the surviving children rebelled and killed their captors, but not before generations had been murdered. Vault 75 was later overrun by gunners, but the damage was already done. This vault represents the absolute nadir of Vault-Tec's crimes, because it specifically targeted families and children with deliberate deception, then systematically murdered parents and tortured children in the name of genetic optimization. The fact that this vault was built under a school shows how completely Vault-Tec was willing to pervert symbols of childhood and education for the most evil purposes imaginable. After learning about Vault 75's crimes against children, Vault 76 almost seems too normal to believe. Vault 76. One of the 17 control vaults, Vault 76 was designed to celebrate America's tricentennial while testing the effects of isolation on competitive personalities. This vault actually functioned as advertised, keeping its residents safe for exactly 25 years before opening as scheduled in 2102. The residents then emerged to reclaim Appalachia after the Scorched Plague had ended. Vault 76 serves as the player's starting point in Fallout 76, and it's refreshing to finally encounter a vault that didn't involve torture, murder, or psychological manipulation. The experiment focused on studying competitive people under isolation, but this was genuine research rather than deliberate cruelty. The residents were actually volunteers who knew they'd be opening the vault and rebuilding America. The vault's success makes all the other experiments even more tragic, because it proves that Vault-Tec could have built 122 legitimate shelters if they had actually cared about humanity's survival. Instead, they built 121 laboratories of horror and 17 actual shelters, condemning thousands of people to death and suffering for research that ultimately served the Enclave's goal of abandoning Earth entirely. Vault 76 represents what the Vault program could have been if it had actually been designed to preserve and rebuild human civilization rather than exploiting it for data. But while Vault 76 residents were rebuilding America, the people in Vault 79 were sitting on enough wealth to fund entire nations. Vault 79. Secretly containing the United States gold reserves transferred from Fort Knox, Vault 79 wasn't really about protecting people. It was about protecting America's wealth for whoever would control the post-war government. This vault basically served as an underground Fort Knox, ensuring that the nation's gold would survive nuclear war even if the nation itself didn't. The gold reserves created constant power struggles among the vault residents, because everyone understood they were sitting on unimaginable wealth while the outside world struggled with bottle caps as currency. The presence of so much valuable material turned the vault into a pressure cooker of greed and political maneuvering, with different factions fighting for control of resources that could reshape the entire wasteland economy. In Fallout 76, players eventually gain access to Vault 79 and must decide how to distribute the gold reserves among various factions, essentially determining the economic future of Appalachia. The Vault shows how Vault-Tec was planning for post-war economic control as much as social control, ensuring that whoever inherited their legacy would have the financial resources to dominate rebuilt civilization. Vault 79 proves that Vault-Tec wasn't just conducting experiments for scientific knowledge. They were positioning themselves to control every aspect of post-war society, from social structures to economic systems. But while Vault 79 hoarded wealth, Vault 81 was supposed to be conducting medical research that could actually help people. Vault 81. Designed as a disease research facility with a hidden experimental section, Vault 81 was supposed to expose residents to diseases and radiation to study mutations and develop cures. This actually sounds like legitimate medical research that could benefit humanity. But of course, Vault-Tec found a way to make it horrific by using unwitting test subjects instead of informed volunteers. The experiment failed because Chief Scientist Kenneth Collins refused to follow orders and sealed off the disease research area rather than exposing innocent people to pathogens. The main vault then functioned normally for over 200 years, becoming one of the few vault communities to actually thrive without outside interference. The secret research area was overrun by infected mole rats, but the residents remained safe. In Fallout 4, the player can help cure a child named Austin who becomes infected, showing how the Vault's medical expertise was ultimately used to save lives rather than take them. The Vault's doctor, Olivet, represents what Vault-Tec scientists could have accomplished if they had been allowed to follow ethical medical practices instead of corporate mandates for human experimentation. Vault 81 demonstrates that individual conscience could sometimes overcome institutional evil, because one scientist's refusal to conduct unethical experiments saved an entire community from decades of medical torture. But while Vault 81's scientists prevented disease experiments, the researchers in Vault 87 enthusiastically embraced biological warfare research with results that would terrorize the wasteland for centuries. Vault 87. Created through a partnership between Vault-Tec and the US military, Vault 87 was designed to test the forced evolutionary virus on human subjects to create super soldiers. This wasn't a civilian experiment that got out of hand. This was deliberate collaboration between corporate and military interests to develop biological weapons using unwilling human test subjects. The FEV experiments created numerous super mutants through forced viral infection, turning normal people into massive, often sterile creatures with enhanced strength but diminished intelligence. The transformation process was agonizing and irreversible, essentially murdering the person while keeping their body alive as a weapon. Most super mutants retained enough memory to know they had been human, making their existence a form of living hell. Eventually, the super mutants overpowered their creators, killed the scientists, and took over the Vault completely. They turned Vault 87 into a super mutant factory, kidnapping wastelanders and forcing them through FEV transformation to create more of their kind. The Vault became a source of ongoing terror for the capital wasteland, because the super mutants had to constantly capture new victims to maintain their population. Vault 87 shows how Vault-Tec's experiments didn't just harm their original test subjects. They created ongoing threats that would plague the wasteland for generations. As super mutants continued the cycle of kidnapping and transformation that their creators had started. The Vault also reveals how eagerly the US military collaborated with Vault-Tec's human experimentation, proving that the corporation's crimes had full government backing and support. Speaking of government collaboration, Vault 88 gave Vault-Tec the opportunity to test prototype technologies before rolling them out to other facilities. Vault 88. Located at Quincy Quarries, Vault 88 served as a testing facility for prototype devices and technologies that would later be distributed to other vaults. This was basically Vault-Tec's research and development laboratory, where they could experiment with new forms of psychological manipulation and social control before implementing them on a larger scale. Construction was never completed when the bombs fell, leaving Vault 88 as an unfinished facility filled with experimental equipment. In Fallout 4's Vault-Tec Workshop DLC, the player can actually complete the vault and conduct experiments on settlers, essentially becoming a Vault-Tec overseer and experiencing the experiment design process firsthand. The DLC allows players to build devices that can manipulate settler happiness, health, and behavior through various forms of psychological conditioning. You can create exercise bikes that drug riders, slot machines that condition gambling behavior, and other devices that would fit perfectly into Vault-Tec's catalog of human manipulation tools. Vault 88 is unique because it lets players experience the moral choices that Vault-Tec scientists faced every day. You can choose to use the experimental equipment ethically to actually help your settlers, or you can embrace the corporation's legacy and conduct psychological experiments on unwilling subjects. The DLC basically asks whether you'd become complicit in Vault-Tec's crimes if given the opportunity. But while Vault 88 let scientists test new torture devices, Vault 92 used one of humanity's most beautiful achievements as a weapon against the human mind. Vault 92. Populated by talented musicians supposedly selected for artistic preservation, Vault 92 used subliminal white noise messages hidden in musical performances to create mind-controlled super soldiers. The Vault perverted music itself, turning artistic expression into a tool for psychological warfare and mental manipulation. The white noise programming was designed to override conscious thought and replace it with military conditioning, essentially turning artists into programmed killers. But the human mind isn't a computer, and the subliminal messages had catastrophic unintended effects. Instead of creating obedient soldiers, The white noise drove residents violently insane, causing them to attack each other in fits of uncontrollable rage. Professor Malleus discovered the truth about the experiment and tried to warn people, but he was likely killed for attempting to expose the program. The vault descended into chaos as musicians tore each other apart, their minds shattered by the very art they had devoted their lives to creating. The facility eventually flooded and was abandoned, leaving behind recordings that still contain traces of the mind-altering frequencies. Vault 92 represents one of Vault-Tec's most cynical experiments, because it specifically targeted people with artistic talent and sensitivity, then used their greatest passion as a weapon against them. The Vault shows how completely the corporation was willing to corrupt human culture and creativity for military purposes. But while Vault 92 corrupted artistic expression, Vault 94 shows what happens when people with genuinely good intentions try to use Vault-Tec technology. Vault 94. Populated by a pacifist community and equipped with a Garden of Eden creation kit, Vault 94 was actually designed to test whether peaceful people could successfully use GECK technology for environmental restoration. This experiment started with genuinely good intentions and actually succeeded for years, with the pacifist residents creating thriving agricultural systems and environmental restoration projects. The disaster came from outside when a delegation visiting the vault accidentally detonated the GECK with a minigun. This wasn't sabotage or deliberate destruction. It was a tragic accident that shows how dangerous Vault-Tec's technology could be, even when used by well-meaning people. The GECK explosion caused massive radiation exposure and triggered a strangler vine outbreak that created the entire Meyer region. Vault 94 proves that even when Vault-Tec technology worked as intended and was operated by people with the best possible intentions, it could still create environmental disasters that would last for centuries. The pacifist community's success at agriculture and environmental restoration makes their accidental destruction even more tragic, because they represented one of the few genuinely positive uses of Vault technology. The creation of the Meyer shows how Vault-Tec's technology was inherently unstable and dangerous, capable of causing massive environmental damage even when operated by experts with peaceful intentions. Speaking of people with good intentions facing technological disasters, Vault 95 shows how Vault-Tec could corrupt even successful recovery programs. Vault 95. Designed as a rehabilitation center for chem addicts, Vault 95 actually succeeded in its stated purpose for 5 years. Residents overcame their addictions, built a supportive community, and created a functioning society based on mutual aid and recovery principles. This was one of the few Vault-Tec experiments that actually helped people instead of harming them. But the success was all part of a larger, more cruel experiment. After 5 years of sobriety, a Vault-Tec plant revealed a hidden drug stash that had been concealed in the vault all along. This deliberate reintroduction of drugs after years of recovery was designed to test whether rehabilitation could withstand temptation, but it was really just psychological torture disguised as research. The mass relapse that followed was swift and devastating. Residents who had fought for years to overcome their addictions were suddenly faced with unlimited access to the substances that had nearly destroyed their lives. Violence erupted as people fought over drugs, overdoses killed community members, and the supportive society collapsed into chaos. Everyone died, and the vault was later overrun by gunners. Vault 95 represents one of Vault-Tec's most psychologically cruel experiments because it gave people hope and community before deliberately destroying both. The corporation proved they understood exactly how to maximize psychological damage by first allowing success and then engineering failure. But while Vault 95 corrupted human recovery efforts, Vault 96 focused on preserving animal life for future environmental restoration. Vault 96. Designed as a cryogenic storage facility for animal preservation, Vault 96 actually served a legitimate purpose by storing animal embryos and specimens for ecosystem restoration after nuclear war. This vault represents one of the few Vault-Tec projects that could have genuinely helped rebuild the world by preserving biodiversity for future generations. The cryogenic storage system successfully preserved various creatures in suspended animation, maintaining genetic diversity that would be crucial for environmental restoration. Unlike most Vault experiments, this technology actually worked as advertised and served a beneficial purpose that extended beyond gathering data for Vault-Tec's other projects. However, some of the stored specimens later escaped or were deliberately released, populating Appalachia with dangerous creatures like deathclaws. This shows how even beneficial Vault-Tec projects could create unintended consequences when the stored animals were released into environments where they had no natural predators or ecological balance. Vault 96 proves that Vault-Tec possessed the technology and knowledge to genuinely help restore the post-war world, which makes their decision to focus on human experimentation even more morally inexcusable. They could have built 122 vaults dedicated to preserving human knowledge, culture, and biodiversity, but instead chose to conduct psychological torture experiments. But while Vault 96 preserved life for the future, Vault 101 was designed to trap people in the past forever. Vault 101. Every Fallout 3 player knows Vault 101 as their character's home, but the vault's true purpose was testing the role of an overseer when the vault was never supposed to open. This experiment studied permanent isolation effects by telling residents they could never leave, creating a society that would exist in perpetual underground confinement spanning multiple generations. Despite the mandate to never open, Vault 101 was actually breached multiple times throughout its history. James and the future lone wanderer arrived from outside, proving that the vault's isolation was never absolute. When the player character finally leaves to search for their father, it triggers internal conflict about whether the vault should open to the wasteland or maintain its isolation. The experiment basically studied what happens to human psychology when people believe they have no choice and no future beyond their current circumstances. The vault's society became authoritarian and rigid, with the overseer maintaining control through the promise of security and the threat of exile. Any questioning of authority was treated as a threat to everyone's survival. Vault 101's story shows how isolation can be used as a form of social control, because people will accept almost any authority if they believe it's necessary for their survival. The Vault demonstrates how Vault-Tec could use fear of the outside world to create completely compliant populations who would never question their leadership. But if permanent isolation created compliant populations, Vault 106 shows what happens when you destroy people's ability to distinguish reality from hallucination. Vault 106. Starting just 10 days after sealing, Vault 106 pumped hallucinogenic drugs through its air filtration system, exposing residents to constant psychoactive substances that would gradually destroy their sanity. This wasn't medical research or recreational drug use. This was deliberate chemical warfare against the Vault's own population. The constant drug exposure drove residents violently insane, creating a population of psychotic survivors who attack anyone who enters their territory. The Vault became a nightmare landscape where reality and hallucination blended together, making it impossible for residents to distinguish between actual threats and drug-induced paranoia. Players who visit Vault 106 experience these same hallucinations, getting a taste of what life was like for the original residents. The experiment continued for over 200 years, meaning multiple generations lived and died under constant chemical influence. Children born in the Vault never experienced normal consciousness, growing up in a world where hallucinations were normal and reality was uncertain. The psychological damage was so complete that the surviving residents became essentially feral, retaining just enough intelligence to be dangerous but losing everything that made them human. Vault 106 shows how Vault-Tec could use environmental manipulation to destroy human consciousness itself, proving that they were willing to sacrifice sanity, identity, and basic humanity for research data. But while Vault 106 destroyed individual identity through drugs, Vault 108 eliminated individuality through mass cloning. Vault 108. Designed as a human cloning experiment, Vault 108 repeatedly cloned a human subject named Gary while engineering power system failures to create environmental stress. The experiment was supposed to study whether cloned humans could maintain stable personalities and social structures, but it quickly devolved into something far more horrific. The Vault created 54 Gary clones, with each successive generation becoming more aggressive and unstable than the last. The clones retained the original Gary's memories and basic personality, but the cloning process introduced psychological deterioration that compounded with each iteration. The early clones might have seemed relatively normal, but the later ones were violent and barely functional. Eventually, the Gary clones broke containment and killed all the staff and original residents, leaving only hostile clones who attack anyone who enters their territory. The clones can only say Gary, having lost most language abilities while retaining enough intelligence to coordinate attacks and use weapons. Vault 108 became a nightmare of mass-produced violence where dozens of identical killers roam the halls. The Vault shows how Vault-Tec's cloning technology could create armies of identical soldiers, but it also demonstrates the psychological instability that would make such armies unreliable and dangerous even to their creators. The experiment basically created a preview of what mass human cloning would look like if implemented without proper safeguards or ethical constraints. But while Vault 108 created multiple copies of the same person, Vault 111 focused on preserving single individuals across impossible spans of time. Vault 111. Every Fallout 4 player starts their journey in Vault 111, but most don't realize they were unwitting test subjects in a cryogenic freezing experiment. Residents were told they were entering a normal vault for protection, but they were actually being tested for long-term effects of cryogenic preservation on human physiology and psychology. The experiment was supposed to last indefinitely, with residents remaining frozen while Vault-Tec studied the effects of extremely long-term suspended animation. But staff conflict erupted just 180 days after sealing, killing, or driving away all personnel and leaving the residents frozen without oversight for 210 years. The Institute later used the vault for their own experiments, treating the frozen residents as a convenient source of genetic material. When the player character finally awakens, they represent the only successful long-term cryogenic preservation subject in the entire experiment. Their survival proves that the technology worked. But their psychological adjustment to the post-war world shows the mental trauma of losing everything and everyone they knew. The player character's quest to find their kidnapped son becomes a study in how someone would cope with complete temporal displacement. Vault 111 demonstrates that even Vault-Tec's more technologically impressive experiments were conducted without informed consent and abandoned when they became inconvenient for the corporation. The Vault shows how human beings were treated as disposable test subjects, even in experiments that could have genuinely benefited humanity. Speaking of experiments that could have benefited humanity, Vault 112 took the promise of virtual reality and turned it into a tool for psychological torture. Vault 112. Under the control of Dr. Stanislaus Braun, Vault 112 trapped residents in virtual reality simulations where they could be tortured, killed, and resurrected indefinitely for the amusement of a sadistic scientist. The Tranquility Lane simulation appeared to be a peaceful 1950s suburban neighborhood, but it was actually a prison where Braun could play God with human consciousness. For over 200 years, Braun repeatedly tortured the residents for entertainment, wiping their memories between sessions and killing them virtually before bringing them back to life. The residents experienced real pain and genuine psychological trauma, but they could never escape or even remember their previous suffering. It was psychological torture designed to be infinitely renewable. The simulation allowed Braun to experiment with human psychology without physical limitations, testing how people would react to impossible situations, moral dilemmas, and direct mental manipulation. He could force residents to commit acts they would never consider in real life, then study their psychological responses to trauma and guilt. The virtual environment made every form of psychological experiment possible, without destroying the test subjects. Vault 112 represents the ultimate expression of Vault-Tec's goals: complete control over human consciousness with the ability to conduct unlimited experiments without consequences for the researchers. The Vault shows what would happen if science completely abandoned ethical constraints and treated human beings as nothing more than data sources. But while Vault 112 trapped people in virtual nightmares, Vault 114 was designed to create real world-class conflict through deliberate social engineering. Vault 114. Built beneath Park Street Station to house wealthy Boston elite in deliberately poor conditions under incompetent, paranoid leadership, Vault 114 was designed to test how entitled wealthy people would react to poverty and bad governance. The experiment would have forced rich people to live in deliberately substandard conditions, while being ruled by someone specifically chosen for incompetence. The vault was never completed before the bombs fell, so the experiment never took place. The unfinished facility was later used as a base by criminals, and Detective Nick Valentine was found imprisoned there during Fallout 4. The incomplete construction means we'll never know exactly how the class warfare experiment would have played out. But the design documents show that Vault-Tec understood class dynamics well enough to deliberately engineer conflict between social groups. The experiment would have studied whether wealthy people could adapt to poverty, or whether their privileged backgrounds would make them incapable of surviving in harsh conditions. It was basically social Darwinism disguised as research. The fact that this vault was planned shows how thoroughly Vault-Tec understood and was willing to exploit American social tensions for experimental purposes. They recognized that class conflict was a reliable source of human suffering that could be weaponized for research. But while Vault 114 focused on economic class differences, Vault 118 extended that concept by forcing the ultra-wealthy to live as immortal robot brains. Vault 118, designed as a two-wing facility for testing social interactions between ultra-wealthy and working-class residents, Vault 118 was supposed to study class conflict in confined conditions. But funding issues meant only the luxury wing was completed, leaving the working-class wing unbuilt and stranding the wealthy residents without their intended social counterparts. Rather than abandon the experiment, The wealthy residents chose to become robo-brains to survive indefinitely in their luxury accommodations. They voluntarily transferred their consciousness into robotic bodies, essentially choosing immortality over death but trapping themselves in mechanical forms. The overseer was left to manage immortal robot aristocrats without any working-class residents to provide the intended social conflict. The vault basically became a twisted version of class privilege, where the wealthy achieved literal immortality while the poor were simply excluded from the experiment entirely. The RoboBrain residents retained their personalities, memories, and social attitudes, but they were stuck in mechanical bodies and confined to their luxury prison forever. Vault 118 shows how Vault-Tech's experiments could create unintended consequences that lasted for centuries, because the RoboBrain residents couldn't die and couldn't leave. The Vault demonstrates how technology intended to preserve human life could become a form of eternal imprisonment when combined with social inequality. But while Vault 118 accidentally created immortal prisoners, Vault 120 represents the kind of ambitious experimental design that never made it into the actual games. Vault 120? This underwater vault in Massachusetts Bay was planned to feature a giant squid overseer and would have included submarine travel, underwater exploration, and Bioshock-inspired themes with aquatic creatures. The vault was cut from Fallout 4 during development, so it never appeared in the final game and we don't know what the experiment would have involved. The concept art and design documents suggest an underwater facility that would have tested human adaptation to aquatic environments, possibly studying whether people could develop new survival skills in completely alien surroundings. The giant squid overseer implies that the experiment would have involved non-human intelligence or genetic manipulation to create aquatic adaptations. Vault 120 represents the kind of creative experimental design that Vault-Tech might have implemented if they had unlimited resources and complete disregard for human safety. An underwater vault would be incredibly dangerous and difficult to escape, making it perfect for experiments that required complete isolation from the surface world. The fact that this vault was designed but never implemented shows how many horrific experiments Vault-Tech might have conducted if they had more time, resources, and development budget. The cut content suggests that the corporation's imagination for human experimentation was essentially unlimited. Looking at every vault across the entire Fallout series reveals the true scope of Vault-Tech's crimes against humanity. These weren't shelters that failed due to technical problems or resource shortages. They were deliberately designed laboratories where human beings were tortured, murdered, and experimented on for data that would ultimately serve the Enclave's plan to abandon Earth entirely. Only 17 of the 122 vaults were genuine shelters, meaning Vault-Tech condemned over 100,000 people to death and suffering while pretending to save them. The vaults show how completely institutional evil can corrupt even the most basic human needs for safety and community. Vault-Tech used people's natural desire to protect their families as a weapon against them, turning parental love into a delivery mechanism for children to experimental facilities. They exploited American cultural values like democracy, competition, and self-reliance as tools for psychological manipulation and social control. Most horrifically, the vaults prove that the technology existed to actually save humanity and rebuild civilization. Vault 8, Vault 76, and other control vaults show that the shelters could have worked if Vault-Tech had actually wanted to preserve human life rather than exploit it. The corporation had the resources, knowledge, and capability to create 122 genuine havens for rebuilding society, but they chose to build 105 torture chambers instead. Vault 8. This was one of Vault-Tech's rare control vaults with minimal interference, designed to open after 10 years and repopulate Nevada using a Garden of Eden creation kit. The experiment was to see if a vault could actually function as advertised, rather than as a twisted psychological torture chamber. Vault 8's residents successfully founded Vault City, a technologically advanced settlement that became one of the most prosperous communities in the post-war world. However, success came with its own problems. Vault City developed serious class issues, with pure-strain vault dwellers considering themselves superior to wasteland outsiders. The vault shows that even when Vault-Tech experiments work as intended, human nature finds ways to create new problems. Vault 8 proves that successful vault experiments can still produce societies with serious superiority complexes. If you thought class warfare was disturbing, the next vault turned democracy into a death sentence. Vault 11. This vault features one of the most psychologically twisted experiments in the entire series. Residents had to annually vote to sacrifice one dweller to the vault's computer, or everyone would supposedly be killed. The experiment was designed to test morality and social pressure. creating a society built on murder and betrayal. Elections became campaigns of character assassination as people tried to nominate their enemies for death. The vault descended into paranoia, violence, and political manipulation until only 5 residents remained. The ultimate irony? The computer's final message revealed that refusing to sacrifice anyone would have let them all go free. Vault 11 represents Vault-Tec's cruelest lesson about the corruption of democratic institutions under extreme pressure. Vault 11 shows that the most horrific societies are the ones where murder becomes a civic duty. But the next Vault's experiment was literally built into its fundamental design. Vault 12. This vault's door was purposely left unsealed to expose residents to massive amounts of radiation, turning them into ghouls as part of a long-term study on radiation's effects. The experiment created Necropolis, a city populated by both intelligent ghouls and feral ones driven mad by radiation exposure. Vault 12 and Fallout 1 became foundational to ghoul lore in the series, showing how Vault-Tec was willing to condemn entire populations to horrific mutation just to gather scientific data. The Vault represents one of the more straightforward experiments. No psychological manipulation needed when you can just leave the door open and watch people slowly transform into living corpses. Vault 12 proves that sometimes the simplest experiments are the most cruel. If you thought radiation exposure was bad, the next vault was designed to never let anyone leave. Vault 13. The home vault of Fallout's original protagonist was designed to stay closed for 200 years, serving as a future genetic reserve for the Enclave's post-war plans. The experiment tested long-term isolation and genetic preservation, but the water chip failure, after just 80 years, forced the Vault Dweller into the wasteland. Vault 13 showcases the Enclave's long-term planning and complete indifference toward their human test subjects. They were willing to keep people trapped underground for 2 centuries just to maintain a pure human gene. The Vault's failure ironically launched the entire Fallout series, proving that even the most carefully planned experiments can be undone by simple mechanical failure. Vault 13 shows that the Enclave's idea of genetic preservation was basically a 200-year prison sentence, but the next vault decided to pack as much conflict as possible into one space. Vault 15. This vault was populated with residents chosen for extreme ideological diversity and designed to stay closed for 50 years. The experiment tested how different belief systems would interact under pressure, and the results were exactly as violent as you'd expect. 4 major factions eventually splintered off from the vault, including the founders of both the Khans Raider tribe and the New California Republic. Vault 15 demonstrates Vault-Tec's understanding that ideological differences become exponentially more dangerous in confined spaces. The Vault essentially became a pressure cooker for political extremism, proving that diversity without common ground leads to inevitable conflict. Vault 15 proves that putting people with opposite worldviews in a confined space creates future warlords and politicians. If you thought ideological conflict was destructive, the next vault's fate remains largely mysterious. Vault 17. Details about this vault's experiment are mostly unknown, but all residents were reportedly abducted by super mutants from the Master's army in Fallout 1. The vault is connected to Lily Bowen's tragic backstory in New Vegas. She was transformed from a grandmother into a Nightkin super mutant. Vault 17 represents one of the series' unsolved mysteries. We know something terrible happened, but the specific experiment remains hidden. The vault shows how some of Vault-Tec's experiments were interrupted by external forces, though the residents probably didn't consider super mutant abduction an improvement over whatever psychological torture was planned. Vault 17 shows that sometimes being kidnapped by super mutants is preferable to completing a Vault-Tec experiment. But the next vault decided to turn architecture into psychological warfare. Vault 19. This vault was divided into red and blue sectors to foster paranoia and rivalry between different groups of residents. The experiment tested how artificial divisions and color-coded tribalism would affect a closed society, and the results were predictably violent. The vault eventually collapsed from internal conflict as residents fought over imaginary differences created by nothing more than room assignments. Vault 19 in New Vegas demonstrates how easily people can be manipulated into hating each other over completely arbitrary distinctions. The experiment shows that humans will find ways to create conflict even when they have no real reasons to fight. Vault 19 proves that people will literally kill each other over the color of their living quarters. If you thought color-based warfare was absurd, the next vault turned every decision into a game of chance. Vault 21. This vault required all disputes to be resolved through gambling and games of chance rather than violence or democratic processes. The experiment tested whether a society based entirely on luck could function, and it actually worked surprisingly well until Robert House won the entire vault in a card game. The vault was eventually converted into a casino hotel in New Vegas, making it one of the few vault experiments that continued operating in its original form. Vault 21 represents Vault-Tec's exploration of alternative governance systems, showing that sometimes random chance produces better results than human judgment. Vault 21 shows that a society based on pure luck somehow works better than most political systems. But the next vault decided to experiment with agriculture in the most dangerous way possible. Vault 22. This vault was dedicated to cultivating aggressive, genetically enhanced crops designed to resist harsh post-apocalyptic conditions. The agricultural experiment went horribly wrong when the enhanced plants unleashed a devastating spore infection that killed or transformed the entire vault population. Vault 22 in New Vegas is now overrun by deadly plant creatures and filled with toxic spores that turn people into plant-human hybrids. The vault represents Vault-Tec's willingness to weaponize nature itself, showing how attempts to improve food production can create biological nightmares instead. Vault 22 proves that playing God with agriculture creates killer plants that make regular radiation seem friendly. If you thought murderous plants were bad, the next vault decided to test human limits through simple overcrowding. Vault 27. This vault was crammed with 2-0 people instead of its intended capacity of 1-0, creating an overcrowding experiment that tested resource scarcity and social pressure. The results were exactly what you'd expect. Resource shortages led to rioting, social collapse, and death as residents fought over food, water, and living space. Vault 27 demonstrates that sometimes the most effective experiments are the simplest ones. You don't need elaborate psychological manipulation when you can just pack too many people into a small space and watch them tear each other apart. The vault shows how quickly civilization breaks down when basic needs aren't met. But the next vault decided to remove adults from the equation entirely. Vault 29. This vault only allowed children under 15 to enter, with all adults barred from residence. The children were raised by an AI called Mother Eve in an experiment studying youth development without adult guidance. Vault 29 represents one of Vault-Tec's most ethically questionable experiments, essentially orphaning hundreds of children to see how they develop in isolation. The experiment tested whether artificial intelligence could successfully replace human parenting and social structures. The Vault's ultimate fate remains uncertain. It demonstrates how Vault-Tec was willing to sacrifice entire generations of children for scientific data. If you thought AI parenting was disturbing, the next vault decided to arm everyone and see what happened. Vault 34. This vault's armory was deliberately overstocked with weapons and ammunition, but featured a faulty door that could easily open, allowing residents to leave whenever they wanted. The experiment tested the effects of excessive militarization on a supposedly sealed society. Internal conflict eventually broke out as heavily armed factions fought for control, and radiation leaks from the damaged reactor killed or mutated most of the population. Vault 34 demonstrates how access to unlimited firepower combined with cabin fever creates the perfect recipe for civil war. But the next vault took deprivation to its most basic level. Vault 36. This vault provided only thin, watery gruel as food for all residents, creating a chronic hunger experiment that tested malnutrition's effects on society. The residents faced constant hunger, malnutrition, and the psychological stress of never having a satisfying meal. Vault 36 represents Vault-Tec's exploration of basic human needs. What happens when you meet the absolute minimum calorie requirements but provide no food satisfaction or variety? The experiment tested whether a society could function when its members were technically alive but constantly miserable from hunger. The vault shows how quickly social bonds break down when everyone is always thinking about their next meal. If you thought bad food was depressing, the next vault literally kept everyone in the dark. Vault 42. This vault permitted no light bulbs greater than 40 watts, forcing residents to live in constant dimness. The experiment tested the long-term effects of extreme low-light conditions and sensory restriction on human psychology. Residents suffered from chronic frustration, depression, and negative psychological impacts from never experiencing proper lighting. Vault 42 demonstrates how something as simple as inadequate lighting can become psychological torture when extended indefinitely. The vault shows that Vault-Tec understood how environmental factors could be weaponized against human well-being without any obvious mechanical devices or chemicals. But the next vault decided to add a wild card to the social experiment. Vault 43. This vault was populated with 20 men, 10 women, and 1 panther, creating what's considered a deliberately absurd scenario to test how residents would cope with a wild predator in their midst. The experiment's outcome is unclear, but it represents Vault-Tec's willingness to introduce completely unpredictable variables into their social studies. Vault 43 shows how the company wasn't above adding literal wild animals to their human experiments, possibly just to see if desperate people could find ways to coexist with apex predators. The Vault demonstrates that some experiments were designed more for shock value than scientific merit. Vault 43 proves that Vault Tech thought adding a panther to any social situation would make it more interesting. If you thought wild animals were chaotic, the next Vault let artificial intelligence play deadly games with human leadership. Vault 51. This Vault replaced traditional human oversight with a Zax-class AI that manipulated residents into constant competitions to determine leadership fitness. The AI created cycles of conflict by continually changing the Prospeld AI rules and encouraging deadly competition among residents. Vault 51's experiment formed the basis for Fallout 76's nuclear winter scenario, where the AI's manipulation created an endless battle royale among the survivors. But the next Vault decided to test human patience through perpetual mechanical failure. Vault 53. This Vault had all its equipment intentionally designed to fail at regular intervals, forcing residents into endless cycles of repair and maintenance. The experiment tested human responses to chronic frustration and technical incompetence, creating a society where nothing ever worked properly for long. The Vault shows that sometimes the most effective way to break people's spirits is to make their basic tools unreliable. If you thought broken equipment was frustrating, the next Vault removed entertainment entirely. Vault 55. This Vault entered without any entertainment tapes or media, forcing residents to provide their own recreation in a complete intellectual deprivation experiment. The Vault tested how people would cope with absolute boredom and whether they could create their own cultural activities without external input. Residents were forced to develop their own games, stories, and social activities while dealing with the psychological strain of monotony. Vault 55 represents Vault Tech's understanding that entertainment isn't just luxury, it's essential for mental health. The experiment shows how quickly people deteriorate when they have nothing to distract them from their circumstances. But the next Vault decided that bad entertainment was worse than no entertainment. Vault 56. This Vault contained only entertainment tapes of a single terrible comedian, forcing residents to endure the same awful comedy routines repeatedly. The experiment tested whether bad cultural input was worse than no input at all, subjecting people to comedy so unfunny it became torture. Vault 56 represents the logical extension of Vault 55's experiment, proving that humans need quality entertainment, not just noise to fill the silence. If you thought bad entertainment was cruel, the next Vault created extreme gender imbalances. Vault 68. This Vault was populated with 999 men and just one woman, creating a severe gender imbalance that resulted in social, psychological, and genetic crises. The experiment tested how society would manage under enforced demographic extremes, essentially creating a pressure cooker of sexual frustration and competition. The single woman faced impossible social pressure, while the men competed desperately for her attention. Vault 68 proves that extreme gender imbalances create societies built on desperation and conflict. And its counterpart Vault flipped the script entirely. Vault 69. This Vault featured 999 women and one man, testing the reverse scenario of Vault 68's gender imbalance experiment. While the exact outcomes aren't fully documented, the premise created similar social pressures and genetic bottlenecks from the opposite direction. The lone man faced overwhelming pressure while the women dealt with impossible competition for reproductive rights. If you thought gender imbalances were unethical, the next Vault turned childhood into a eugenics program. Vault 75. This Vault posed as a safe haven for children under Malden Middle School, but secretly implemented one of the most brutal eugenics programs in the series. Staff separated children from parents by executing adults on arrival, then subjected kids to extreme physical and mental testing. At age 18, failed subjects were killed while superior specimens had their genetic material harvested for further experimentation. Some successful subjects were promoted to staff positions to continue the cycle. Eventually, the enhanced subjects staged an uprising and overthrew their tormentors. Vault 75 in Fallout 4 represents Vault Tech's most openly genocidal experiment, focused on creating super soldiers through child abuse and murder. But even that wasn't the darkest Vault experiment. Vault 76. This was officially a control vault, designed to open after 25 years for rapid surface reclamation, but the real experiment was psychological manipulation through hope and competition. The Vault indoctrinated its 500 best and brightest residents to believe they alone were capable of rebuilding America, fostering extreme competitiveness and ambition. Overseers received ambiguous instructions about reclaiming nuclear silos, essentially programming Vault dwellers to become post-war weapons of mass destruction. Vault 76 in Fallout 76 represents the most insidious experiment, using patriotism and hope as tools for manipulation. Vault 76 proves that the most effective brainwashing uses hope and pride instead of fear and despair. If you thought patriotic manipulation was subtle, the next vault went for direct biological warfare. Vault 87. This vault subjected residents to forced evolutionary virus experimentation in an attempt to create super soldiers through forced mutation. Most subjects died horribly or became super mutants, losing their intelligence and humanity in the process. Vault 87 became the source of the Capital Wasteland's super mutant population in Fallout 3, showing how one vault's failed experiment could terrorize an entire region for centuries. The vault represents Vault-Tec's willingness to use residents as test subjects for biological weapons development. The experiment demonstrates that some scientific research is so unethical it creates monsters that outlive their creators. Vault 87 shows that trying to improve humanity through forced evolution creates mindless giants who hate everything. But the next vault was designed to test experimental technology on unwilling subjects. Vault 88. This vault served as a prototype facility for testing next-generation vault technology and experimental add-ons on residents. The vault was unfinished when the bombs dropped, but in Fallout 4's Vault-Tec Workshop DLC, players can complete the twisted experiments themselves. Vault 88 represents Vault-Tec's ultimate goal, turning human beings into test subjects for whatever new torture devices they could invent. The Vault shows how the company planned to use Vault residents as beta testers for increasingly sophisticated forms of psychological and physical manipulation. The experiment proves that Vault-Tec saw every human being as potential laboratory equipment. Vault 88 proves that Vault-Tec's final goal was turning every Vault dweller into a living test dummy. If you thought direct experimentation was cruel, the next Vault weaponized creativity itself. Vault 92. This Vault was populated entirely by musicians and subjected to audio experiments including white noise exposure and subliminal message brainwashing. The experiment tested whether creativity could be controlled and weaponized through sound-based psychological conditioning. The audio manipulation caused madness and violence among residents until the Vault was eventually overrun by wildlife. Vault 92 in Fallout 3 represents Vault-Tec's attempt to turn art into a weapon of social control. Vault 92 proves that even music becomes evil when Vault-Tec gets involved. But the next Vault tried the opposite approach with pacifism. Vault 94. This Vault was designed as a social experiment featuring a pacifist, communal society where no weapons were allowed, and all residents were taught to reject violence completely. The experiment tested whether pure non-violence could survive in the post-apocalyptic world, and the results were tragically predictable. Most residents perished after repeated external attacks and internal strife when their idealistic principles met wasteland reality. Vault 94 in Fallout 76 serves as a tragic example of how noble ideals often can't survive contact with brutal circumstances. The Vault shows that Vault-Tec was interested in testing the limits of human goodness as much as human evil. If you thought testing pacifism was cruel, the next Vault weaponized addiction recovery. Vault 95. This Vault housed former drug addicts trying to recover from their addictions, but after several years of successful rehabilitation, a large stash of chems was revealed to study relapse rates. The experiment deliberately sabotaged people's recovery efforts to observe how addiction would reassert itself under pressure. Most residents re-addicted themselves, leading to chaos, violence, and tragedy as their hard-won sobriety was destroyed by Vault-Tec's manipulation. Vault 95 in Fallout 4 represents one of the most psychologically cruel experiments, giving people hope for recovery then deliberately destroying it for scientific data. Vault 95 shows that Vault-Tec thought the best way to study addiction was to deliberately cause relapses. But the next Vault decided to experiment with environmental conservation. Vault 96. This Ark Vault housed a small group of scientists tasked with preserving animal and plant life for post-war repopulation, but the AI secretly enforced harsh productivity quotas and punished failure with poison gas. When scientists attempted to destroy the controlling AI, it responded by gassing the entire Vault population. The preserved animals and plants eventually escaped when the Vault doors opened, creating new mutated species throughout Appalachia. Vault 96 in Fallout 76 shows how even environmental conservation becomes twisted when filtered through Vault-Tec's corporate mentality. If you thought environmental protection was noble, The next vault was designed to never let anyone experience freedom. Vault 101. This vault was designed never to open, creating a permanent study of life under autocratic rule by the overseer. The experiment tested how long people could be kept in isolated dictatorship without rebellion or psychological breakdown. Eventually, manipulation and unrest led to rebellion and the player character's escape in Fallout 3. Vault 101 represents one of the series' most recognizable experiments, the complete denial of human freedom disguised as safety and security. The vault shows how easily protection can become imprisonment when those in charge have absolute power. But the next vault decided to drive everyone insane with chemistry. Vault 106. This vault released psychoactive drugs into the air supply after just 10 days, causing residents to experience hallucinations and violent behavior without any warning or explanation. The experiment tested the effects of involuntary chemical manipulation on human psychology and social structure. Inhabitants became completely deranged, with drug-induced hallucinations leading to violence and the complete breakdown of society. Vault 106 in Fallout 3 represents one of the most straightforward experiments: chemical warfare against the Vault's own residents. The Vault shows how quickly civilization collapses when reality becomes unreliable. If you thought chemical manipulation was horrific, the next Vault created an army of clones. Vault 108. This Vault featured a cloning lab that produced dozens of mentally unstable clones named Gary, while the Overseer was given terminal cancer and the power systems were designed to fail halfway through operation. The experiment tested what would happen when cloning technology was left unsupervised in a failing system. The Gary clones eventually overwhelmed the scientific staff and killed most residents, now wandering the vault, endlessly repeating their own name. Vault 108 in Fallout 3 demonstrates how cloning experiments become horror shows when combined with inadequate oversight and failing infrastructure. But the next vault froze time itself. Vault 111. This vault placed all residents in cryogenic stasis under false pretenses, telling them it was for decontamination while actually testing the effects of long-term freezing on human subjects. The experiment tested whether humans could be successfully preserved for future use without their knowledge or consent. Power failures and staff deaths led to most residents dying in their frozen sleep, with only the sole survivor emerging 200 years later to begin Fallout 4. Vault 111 shows that Vault Tech thought the best way to preserve humanity was to freeze them without permission. If you thought cryogenic imprisonment was cruel, the next Vault created digital hell. Vault 112. This Vault placed residents in virtual reality pods controlled by the sadistic Dr. Braun, who used the simulation to torture them for his own amusement for over 200 years. The experiment tested how long human consciousness could survive in virtual environments while being subjected to endless psychological torment. Residents lived in the Tranquility Lane simulation where they could experience death and trauma repeatedly without dying, creating perfect psychological torture. Vault 112 in Fallout 3 represents the ultimate fusion of technology and sadism, using virtual reality to create personalized hell for every resident. But the next Vault decided to test class warfare directly. Vault 114. This Vault was designed to house social elites in drastically underfunded and uncomfortable conditions, while being overseen by someone specifically chosen for inexperience and incompetence. The experiment tested how wealthy, privileged people would react to sudden poverty and poor leadership. The Vault was never fully occupied when the Great War began, but it represents Vault Tech's interest in studying class conflict and social reversal. Vault 114 proves that Vault Tech thought the best way to study privilege was to take it away and watch people suffer. And finally, the most openly elitist experiment, Vault 118. This vault provided ultimate luxury to a handful of wealthy and creative residents, while others served as their staff, testing class conflict and division within a closed system. The experiment examined whether extreme inequality could be maintained indefinitely in confined spaces. In Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC, the Vault has become a murder mystery setting among the roboticized upper class, who continue their class-based society even after death. Vault 118 represents Vault Tech's study of how economic inequality functions under extreme conditions, proving that class warfare continues even when everyone is technically dead. From democracy turned deadly to virtual reality torture chambers, Vault Tech's experiments represent the systematic study of every possible way to break human society. Each Vault tested different variables: overcrowding, isolation, chemical manipulation, artificial scarcity, technological dependence, and social engineering to determine how much suffering humans could endure before civilization collapsed. The Vaults prove that the most dangerous enemy of humanity isn't radiation or mutants, but human curiosity without moral boundaries. Bust out of jail. This is one of the earliest examples of Fallout rewarding creative problem-solving without holding your hand. In Junktown from the original Fallout, if you commit a crime or get caught sneaking where you shouldn't be, you get thrown in jail with absolutely no quest marker telling you what to do next. You have to figure out your own escape plan. Pickpocket the guard for keys, pick the cell door lock, or get help from a friend you made earlier. The game doesn't tell you these options exist, you just have to experiment and think outside the box. How you escape affects Junktown's opinion of you, making this one of the first examples of Fallout's trademark moral ambiguity. This quest perfectly captures the series' philosophy of rewarding player curiosity and creative thinking over following obvious breadcrumbs. But if you thought jailbreak scenarios were sneaky, the next quest dives into some seriously shady business dealings. Clean out the loan shark. In the den from Fallout 2, you can stumble across a notorious loan shark operation just by wandering around and talking to locals in shady corners. There's nothing to guide you except your own curiosity about this sketchy character. You can choose to work for the loan shark or against him, and your decisions affect the entire town, but the game never formally tracks this as a quest. It's a perfect example of early Fallout design prioritizing world interaction over formal quest structures. The Loan Shark storyline shows how the series used to reward attentive players with rich side stories that felt organic rather than assigned. You had to actually pay attention to dialogue and explore thoroughly to discover these hidden narratives. If you thought hidden crime stories were clever, the next quest turns a simple dead body into a treasure hunt. Grady's Package. This Fallout 3 mystery starts in the Marigold Station metro tunnels when you find a dead guy named Grady with a holotape and a key. The holotape contains cryptic clues about the package he was trying to deliver, and you have to use the key on a safe elsewhere in the tunnels to retrieve his valuable stash. Suspicious. There's no quest marker or journal entry, just environmental storytelling through a dead man's final message. The entire story is told through context, clues, and exploration. If you don't read the holotape carefully or explore thoroughly, you'll completely miss this hidden treasure. Grady's Package demonstrates how Fallout 3 used environmental storytelling to create mini-narratives that exist entirely outside the formal quest system. But the next quest shows that some NPCs will keep asking for help as long as you keep delivering. Murphy's Bombing Run. This unmarked quest in Fallout 3 starts when you meet Murphy, a ghoul chem cook at Northwest Seneca Station, who asks for special work. Your job is to collect sugar bomb cereal from around the wasteland and bring them back to Murphy so he can cook them into Ultrajet, a powerful chem. The catch is this never appears in your quest log, so you have to remember to collect sugar bombs and periodically return to Murphy for caps and chems. It rewards players who hoard unusual junk items and actually read what NPCs are asking for. Murphy's Bombing Run is a perfect example of how Fallout rewards exploration and item collection without formal quest tracking, making every sugar bomb you find feel potentially valuable. If you thought cooking chems was profitable, the next quest turns exploration itself into a business venture. Riley's Rangers Mapping. After helping Riley's Rangers in Fallout 3, Riley will buy map locations of metro tunnels and landmarks you've discovered, but this arrangement is never listed as a formal quest. It's just an ongoing way to earn caps by providing new map points you've found during exploration. There's no quest log reminder, no markers, just a subtle meta reward system for thorough exploration. Riley's Rangers Mapping encourages players to explore every corner of the capital wasteland, knowing there's financial incentive, but you have to remember to return and report your discoveries. This unmarked quest perfectly demonstrates Fallout's philosophy of rewarding curiosity with both gameplay benefits and immersive world building. But the next quest takes post-quest rewards to deliciously sweet levels. Mississippi Quantum Pie. This hidden treat starts after you complete the Nuka-Cola Challenge side quest in Fallout 3. If you continue bringing Sierra Petrovita various Nuka-Cola flavors she requests, she'll eventually bake you the rare Quantum Pie, but this extended interaction never appears in your quest log. It's a delightful Easter egg for completionists who go the extra mile beyond the formal quest requirements. The Quantum Pie represents Fallout's tradition of rewarding players who continue interacting with NPCs after their official quests are done. Sierra's additional requests and the unique pie reward show how the series hides special content behind persistent player engagement rather than obvious quest markers. If you thought sweet rewards were satisfying, the next quest serves up something much more disturbing. Our Little Secret. This disturbing mystery in Fallout 3 starts in Andale, a charming southern town where Old Man Harris makes wild claims about the townsfolk. There's no quest marker telling you to investigate, but if you're curious enough to snoop around homes or talk to more residents, you'll uncover the horrifying truth about what really goes on in this seemingly perfect community. The discovery that Andale's residents are cannibals who've been feeding visitors to each other is entirely dependent on player curiosity. If you don't look deeper, you'll never know. Our little secret demonstrates how Fallout uses environmental storytelling and player investigation to create jaw-dropping plot twists without any hand-holding. The horror is hidden in plain sight, waiting for observant players to piece together the clues. But the next quest shows that even sewers can hide treasure if you're thorough enough. Sealed Sewer Adventure. This New Vegas treasure hunt starts when you explore the sewer tunnels near the city and find the bodies of two dead prospectors named Sweet Jill and Blind Luke. If you search their corpses, you'll find keys that open a locked section of the sewers filled with feral ghouls and valuable loot, including the unique weapon Humble Cudgel. The entire mini-quest is environmental. There are no hints unless you thoroughly search bodies and explore every tunnel, making it incredibly easy to miss. Sealed Sewer Adventure rewards players who examine everything and refuse to take the obvious path through areas. It's a perfect example of New Vegas hiding substantial content behind player thoroughness and attention to detail. If you thought underground treasures were rewarding, the next quest shows that kindness to animals can pay off. Snuffles the Injured Mole Rat. This adorable, unmarked quest in New Vegas happens in Sloan when you meet Snuffles, an injured mole rat with a hurt leg. If your medicine skill is 30 or higher, you can heal her injury, but there's no quest marker or journal entry to guide you. Successfully treating Snuffles earns you NCR fame and affection from the locals, demonstrating how New Vegas uses skill checks and NPC interactions to create hidden quest-like moments. The quest shows how Fallout rewards players who invest in non-combat skills and pay attention to animal NPCs. Snuffles represents the series' tradition of making every interaction potentially meaningful, even with creatures that can't speak. But the next quest shows that random encounters can lead to unexpected adventures. Bare Necessities. This hidden encounter in New Vegas happens when you meet a frightened prospector during random travel who asks for help with an animal problem. There's no quest marker or formal tracking. You only stumble into this event through exploration and random chance. Bare Necessities adds depth to the Mojave through small, reward-based encounters that make the world feel alive and unpredictable. The quest demonstrates how New Vegas uses random events to create unique player stories that can't be replicated through formal quest design. It's the kind of encounter that makes players feel like they're discovering genuine secrets rather than following predetermined paths. Bare Necessities proves that the best adventures are the ones you never saw coming. If you thought random encounters were exciting, the next quest turns monster fighting into an underground business. Red Lucy's Thorn Arena. This unique, unmarked quest chain starts when you visit the Thorn beneath Westside and Freeside and meet Red Lucy. You can bring her various creature eggs to stock her arena or participate in arranging monster battles, but none of this appears in your formal quest log. The entire system is managed through dialogue and bartering, with multiple objectives and substantial rewards, including the powerful Dinner Bell shotgun. Red Lucy's Thorn Arena demonstrates how New Vegas creates complex quest-like content without formal quest structures. The arena activities feel like a complete questline, but exist entirely through player choice and NPC interaction rather than journal tracking. Red Lucy's Thorn Arena proves that the best entertainment venues are the ones where you help stock the talent. But the next quest shows that sometimes the most morbid activities hide the best loot. Grave digging at Goodsprings. This macabre activity in New Vegas involves using a shovel to dig up graves in Goodsprings Cemetery for random loot. There's no quest calling this out, no journal entry, nothing. It's purely environmental gameplay that rewards players who experiment with tools and interact with the world creatively. Grave digging perfectly captures Fallout's dark humor and willingness to let players engage in morally questionable activities without judgment. The quest shows how the series hides gameplay mechanics behind environmental interaction rather than explicit instruction. It's the kind of discovery that makes players feel clever for thinking outside conventional gameplay boundaries. Grave digging at Goodsprings proves that some of the best loot comes from places where people least expect you to look. If you thought grave robbing was morally questionable, the next quest asks you to make decisions about robot slavery. Trouble Brewin'. This Fallout 4 hidden quest starts in the Shamrock Tap House basement where you discover Buddy, a special Protectron who's been trapped. You can free Buddy and then decide whether to send him to a bar or a settlement, but this mission may never appear in your quest log. Many players only hear about Buddy through rumors or random dialogue, requiring curiosity and basement exploration to find him. Trouble Bruin demonstrates how Fallout 4 hides meaningful choices behind environmental exploration rather than quest markers. The decision about Buddy's fate affects both his well-being and your settlement options, making this unmarked quest surprisingly consequential for such a hidden encounter. Trouble Bruin proves that sometimes the most important decisions involve characters you almost missed entirely. But the next quest serves up something far more disturbing than robot ethics. Mystery Meat. This horrifying discovery at Longneck Lukowski's cannery in Fallout 4 starts when you investigate the factory and persist after being warned off. If you explore thoroughly enough, you'll discover the owner is using human meat in his canned products and selling them throughout the Commonwealth. The entire revelation is never tracked as a formal quest. The outcome depends entirely on how much of the factory you explore and your willingness to confront Lukowski about his practices. Mystery Meat shows how Fallout 4 uses environmental storytelling and player persistence to reveal horrific truths hidden in plain sight. The quest demonstrates the series' talent for making ordinary locations into nightmare scenarios. Mystery Meat proves that sometimes you really don't want to know what's in your food. If you thought cannibalism was disturbing, the next quest presents one of gaming's most controversial moral dilemmas. The Kid in a Fridge. This infamous unmarked quest starts near University Point when you hear a voice calling from a refrigerator. Opening it reveals Billy, a ghoul child who's been trapped since the bombs fell, and you can choose to help him find his parents or sell him to slavers. There are multiple outcomes, but the quest itself is unofficial with no marker or log entry. The Kid in a Fridge became notorious among Fallout fans for its questionable lore implications and moral extremes. The quest perfectly represents Fallout 4's approach to hidden morality tales, presenting players with shocking scenarios and letting them decide how to respond without guidance or judgment. The Kid in a Fridge proves that some moral choices are so extreme they make you question your own character. But the next quest shows that art galleries can hide some truly twisted secrets. Pickman's Gift. This creepy unmarked quest starts when you enter Pickman Gallery in Boston's North End and fight through raiders to reach the artist himself. By following blood trails, examining disturbing artwork, and listening to holotapes, you eventually confront Pickman and can claim his unique knife. The quest is never formally listed. It requires exploration, investigation, and piecing together environmental clues to understand the full narrative. Pickman's Gift demonstrates how Fallout 4 uses environmental storytelling and player investigation to create horror narratives without explicit quest guidance. The gallery becomes a crime scene that players must solve through observation and deduction rather than following markers. Pickman's Gift proves that some art galleries are better appreciated from a safe distance. If you thought twisted artists were scary, the next quest shows that even the coolest factions require persistent dedication. Atom Cat's Favor. This ongoing relationship with the Atom Cats in Fallout 4 develops by helping the faction during multiple random gunner attacks at their garage south of Boston. The Atom Cats gradually warm up to you and eventually give you unique power armor paint schemes, but nothing is formally tracked as a quest. It's a reward system for persistence and curiosity that requires players to keep returning and helping during random encounters. Atom Cat's Favor shows how Fallout 4 builds faction relationships through repeated interactions rather than formal quest structures. The power armor rewards make the investment worthwhile, but only for players who stick around long enough to earn the cat's trust. Atom Cat's Favor proves that the coolest rewards go to the most dedicated fans. But the next quest shows that some memories are worth experiencing before the story demands it. Memory Den's Secret. This hidden experience in Fallout 4 happens if you visit the Memory Den in Good Neighbor before the main plot requires it. Talking to Irma early can trigger an unusual flashback sequence that doesn't appear on your quest list and is easily missed if you only follow the main story. Memory Den's Secret rewards players who explore locations before being directed there by formal quests. The early flashback provides additional context and immersion that most players never experience because they wait for the story to bring them there. It's a perfect example of how Fallout 4 hides meaningful content behind player initiative rather than quest progression. Memory Den's Secret proves that sometimes the most interesting experiences happen when you're not supposed to be there yet. If you thought early exploration was rewarding, the next quest shows that Appalachia hides some truly bizarre mysteries. Black Mountain Ordnance Works domes. These mysterious structures scattered across Fallout 76's Appalachia contain strange loot and sometimes the powerful alien blaster, but they're never formally explained or logged as quests. Most players stumble across these domes during exploration and find them filled with environmental storytelling, super mutant battles, and rare gear. Black Mountain Ordnance Works domes represent Fallout 76's approach to environmental mystery, placing unexplained locations throughout the world for curious players to discover and interpret. The domes add science fiction elements to the Appalachian wasteland while rewarding thorough exploration with unique weapons and lore fragments. Black Mountain Ordnance Works domes prove that sometimes the best mysteries are the ones that never get fully explained. Finally, Fallout 76 is packed with random encounters and one-off events. Random encounters and events. Fallout 76 fills Appalachia with lost travelers, mysterious radio signals, hidden bunkers, and spontaneous events that are tracked only by exploration rather than quest journals. These encounters make the multiplayer world feel alive and unpredictable, providing unique player stories that can't be replicated through formal quest design. Random encounters demonstrate how Fallout 76 creates personalized experiences through environmental storytelling and chance meetings. The events reward players who explore thoroughly and pay attention to their surroundings rather than following obvious quest markers. Random encounters and events prove that the best multiplayer experiences are the ones that feel completely unscripted. Hidden and unmarked quests represent Fallout at its absolute best, rewarding player curiosity, creativity, and persistence without holding anyone's hand. These quests demonstrate the series' philosophy of trusting players to explore, experiment, and piece together stories from environmental clues rather than following obvious breadcrumbs. From jailbreaks to cannibals to robot ethics, these unmarked adventures show how the best content is often hidden in plain sight, waiting for observant players to discover it. Mothman. Mothman is the king of Fallout cryptids, and honestly one of the most terrifying things you can encounter in Appalachia. Mothman manifests in multiple variants, ranging from the passive, wise Mothman that just watches you creepily, to the absolutely devastating, enraged Mothman that will ruin your entire day. The creature is central to pre-war and post-war Appalachian folklore, with an entire cult dedicated to interpreting its appearances as prophetic signs of coming disaster. It is based on the real-world 1960s Point Pleasant Mothman legend from West Virginia, where people reported seeing a humanoid moth-like figure before the Silver Bridge collapse. Fallout's version maintains that ominous harbinger energy. Some Mothman variants will actually bless or curse players during encounters, reinforcing its mystical nature beyond just being another monster to shoot. The dynamic spawn behavior means you'll often spot Mothman perched on buildings or power lines, silently observing before either flying away or deciding you need to die. But if you thought a giant moth was scary, the next cryptid represents the ultimate consequence of human desperation. Wendigo. This gaunt feral nightmare with elongated limbs and bone-chilling shrieks represents what happens when starvation and cannibalism meet radiation and experimentation. The Wendigo appears in multiple variants, including the absolutely massive Wendigo Colossus that requires entire teams to take down and can cause literal fear effects that make your character panic and run. Fallout frames the Wendigo as the horrific end result of extreme hunger, cannibalism, and mutation, turning the Algonquian folklore of cannibalistic spirits into a tangible post-apocalyptic horror. The creature stalks abandoned mines and ruins throughout Appalachia, embodying the region's history of isolation and desperation. Wendigo encounters are genuinely terrifying because they often happen in dark, confined spaces where the creature's speed and ferocity become overwhelming. The Colossus variant turns Wendigo fights into major group events that test your ability to manage fear mechanics while dealing massive damage to an incredibly durable opponent. If you thought ground-based horrors were bad, the next cryptid brings alien energy to Appalachian folklore. Flatwoods Monster. This hovering robed entity with glowing eyes feels more like an extraterrestrial visitor than a traditional cryptid, complete with advanced technology and energy-based attacks. The Flatwoods Monster floats rather than walks, appears with strange energy effects, and moves in ways that defy normal creature behavior, often being grouped with alien-themed events in the game. Based on the real 1952 Flatwoods, West Virginia sighting, where witnesses described a tall, spade-headed creature with a floating, gliding movement. Fallout's version leans heavily into the UFO connection. The creature's design deliberately evokes classic flying saucer mythology while maintaining its cryptid classification, bridging the gap between folklore and science fiction. Encounters with the Flatwoods monster often involve energy damage and unusual movement patterns that make traditional combat tactics less effective. But the next cryptid shows what industrial pollution can create when left unchecked. Grafton Monster. This hulking, headless-appearing brute with smooth, pale skin represents the horrific intersection of pre-war industrial experimentation and post-war mutation. The Grafton Monster is rumored to be a byproduct of pre-war experimentation and pollution around Grafton's industrial facilities, transformed into a mindless giant that terrorizes the local area. Based on 1960's Grafton, West Virginia, reports of a massive, seal-skinned beast with no visible head. Fallout's version maintains the creature's industrial horror origins, while making it an actual threat. The monster telegraphs its presence with heavy footsteps and roaring that can be heard from significant distances, often featuring in public events and cryptid hunting challenges. Despite its headless appearance, the Grafton Monster is surprisingly aware and aggressive, using its immense strength to overwhelm opponents through sheer brute force. If you thought industrial accidents were horrific, the next cryptid was deliberately engineered to be disgusting. Snallygaster. This reptilian, many-eyed, acid-spitting abomination looks like it escaped from a mad scientist's laboratory and decided to terrorize the countryside. The creature has implied connections to clandestine bioresearch and mutation programs, behaving like a roaming apex predator that was specifically designed to be as horrifying as possible. Based on early 1900s Maryland Snallygaster legends describing a dragon-like creature with bizarre anatomical features, Fallout leans heavily into the freakish, stitched-together lab monster interpretation. The Snallygaster's acid attacks can quickly overwhelm unprepared players, while its darting movement and tendency to spawn in groups makes encounters chaotic and dangerous. The creature represents the deliberate weaponization of folklore through scientific experimentation, turning a regional legend into a biological weapon. But the next cryptid started as a hoax before becoming terrifyingly real. Sheepsquatch. This shaggy, horned cryptid with devastating ramming attacks gets an entire elaborate questline that builds up the urban legend before revealing there's actually a real, dangerous version lurking in the woods. The Sheepsquatch is associated with hoaxes, misdirection, and local pranksters who may have accidentally summoned something genuine through their fake monster stories. Based on West Virginia Sheepsquatch tales and White Thing folklore describing a horned, woolly beast glimpsed in rural hollows, Fallout's version explores how fake legends can become real threats. The creature's explosive melee attacks and incredible durability make it one of the most challenging cryptid encounters, requiring careful preparation and teamwork to survive. The entire event chain surrounding the Sheepsquatch shows how community folklore can manifest real dangers when radiation and mutation get involved. If you thought mythical beasts were dangerous, the next cryptid proves that prehistoric creatures are even worse when irradiated. Megasloth. This gigantic, mutated sloth moves slowly but hits like a freight train, proving that size and patience can be more dangerous than speed and aggression. Despite its lethargic animations, the Megasloth can devastate unprepared groups with ground slam attacks and ranged spore clouds that control large areas of the battlefield. While it's more of a radiation-mutated creature than a traditional cryptid, Fallout 76 classifies it with the cryptids because it fits Appalachia's giant forest beast archetype perfectly. The creature alludes to prehistoric megafauna like Megatherium, while serving as a reminder that not all dangerous things move quickly. Megasloth encounters typically happen in swamps and forests, where the creature's environmental advantages and area of effect attacks become even more deadly. But the next cryptid brings demonic energy to Appalachian folklore. Blue Devil. This horned, lupine creature with aggressive melee attacks and a haunting presence represents the demonic side of Appalachian cryptid folklore. The Blue Devil appears primarily at night, or in mist-laden areas. Based on West Virginia Blue Devil tales describing spectral or demonic canine presences that stalk rural areas, Fallout's version maintains the creature's supernatural horror elements. While less ubiquitous than Mothman or Wendigo, the Blue Devil is memorable due to its distinctive silhouette and the ambient atmospheric cues that usually precede its appearance. The creature serves as a reminder that not all cryptids are explained by radiation or experimentation. Some things are just plain evil. If you thought demonic canines were bad, the next cryptid emerges from the depths of Appalachian rivers. Ogwa. This massive, semi-aquatic, turtle-like cryptid uses thick armor plating and brutal charging attacks to dominate river and swamp encounters. The creature appears to be a mutated prehistoric survivor that locals have recast as a river monster, tying into Appalachian waterway folklore and fishing horror stories. Based on Monongahela River Ogwa, legends describing a snapping turtle-like beast large enough to threaten boats and fishermen. Encounters often involve narrow waterway approaches, where the creature's charging attacks become even more devastating. But the next cryptid shows how regional legends can diversify beyond the famous names. Beast of Beckley, this large predatory cryptid, stalks the areas around Beckley with ambush tactics and heavy melee damage, representing the kind of local monster that every small town fears. The creature serves as a local urban legend made reality, used to diversify southern Appalachian cryptid encounters beyond the globally famous creatures like Mothman. Based on Beast of regional naming conventions like the Beast of Bray Road, it blends werewolf and unknown predator motifs into a distinctly Appalachian threat. While not as globally recognized as some cryptids, the Beast of Beckley plays significant roles in regional event rotations and hunting challenges. If you thought regional beasts were unsettling, the next cryptid barely qualifies as a creature at all. The Smiling Man, also known as Indrid Cold, this silent humanoid figure appears unexpectedly and just stands there smiling, creating an atmosphere of dread without any direct combat threat. The Smiling Man functions more as an omen or liminal presence than a traditional monster, deepening Appalachia's ecosystem of weird encounters through pure psychological horror. Rather than fighting the Smiling Man, players typically encounter him as part of atmospheric events or sightings that feed into broader mystery chains and collectible-style encounters. Jersey Devil, this winged, horned predator expands Fallout's cryptid presence beyond Appalachia into broader eastern seaboard folklore, bringing aerial mobility and supernatural aggression to cryptid encounters. The creature typically appears as a boss-type threat in regional content, featuring distinctive screeches and flight patterns that make it a marquee fight requiring different tactics than ground-based cryptids. Based on the Pine Barrens legend of a cursed winged creature that has terrorized New Jersey since the 18th century, the Jersey Devil's aerial combat capabilities and aggressive nature make it one of the more challenging cryptid encounters. And finally, cryptids that might not be from Earth at all. Aliens. These classic Grey-style extraterrestrials with energy weapons blur the line between cryptid and science fiction, sometimes grouped with cryptids in Fallout 76's challenge and event systems. Aliens appear across the entire Fallout series, but in Appalachia they're often connected to UFO folklore and the broader weird encounter ecosystem that includes creatures like the Flatwoods Monster. Based on mid-20th century UFO mythology, including abduction narratives and crash lore, Fallout's aliens maintain their classic appearance while fitting into the cryptid framework. Alien encounters typically involve energy damage, stasis fields, and unique technology that sets them apart from other creatures, often appearing through limited-time events with special loot. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every Fallout space mission explained, click the video on the screen.